Chapter 276, Stop Fooling Around. Meng Hao sat cross-legged in the immortal's cave, pale. A few days later he opened his eyes. They shone with brilliant light. His brow remained furrowed for some time before relaxing. "I injured my soul," he murmured. Sinister coldness filled him and iciness through and through. In Foundation establishment, the cultivation base relates to the Tao pillars. Spiritual sense is born, as are the sea of perception and the cultivation soul. That soul would become the foundation for the future nascent soul. Now Meng Hao could sense his soul had been pulled out of place, a price for the flag's use. Such an injury would be difficult to recover from. Flesh injuries healed through rest or medicinal pills. Soul injuries could not be healed this way. Slaying core formation had been impressive, but the difficulty was far too high. Even with a 10th Tao pillar, it was extremely difficult. There was simply too great a difference between Foundation establishment cultivators and core formation cultivators, especially those who had cultivated core qi. In truth, he was not really qualified to challenge a core formation cultivator. Even with a perfect foundation and 8 Tao pillars, his fight with the azure-masked cultivator had been too challenging. He had used every trick he could think of just to hold his opponent off. It seemed as if he hadn't been defeated, but in truth, the power had existed to destroy him. If any more time had passed, then he would have been vanquished in spectacular fashion. Thankfully, his 9th Tao pillar had appeared, and then the situation changed for the better. Of course, that is what Meng Hao had been aiming for. The intense life or death struggle was what had caused the qi in his body to multiply, enabling him to break through the bottleneck and increase his cultivation base. The need for battle was what had prompted Meng Hao to attack in the first place. Without the 10th Tao pillar and perfect foundation's great circle, he would have been incapable of killing the core formation cultivator. At best, he'd have fought longer. Once the 10th Tao pillar appeared, however, the vast gap between foundation establishment and core formation, which was like that between heaven and earth, had been narrowed by perhaps half. That jump caused the battle prowess of his cultivation base to leap up, far exceeding that of foundation establishment and approaching core formation. The fact was, even with power reaching halfway to core formation, the most he could do would be to tangle with a core formation cultivator. He would never be able to slay one. Similarly, although his opponent would occupy a superior position, they wouldn't find it easy to slay him. What had truly changed the tide had been the flag of 3 streamers, that precious treasure which resided inside the blood-colored mask. The treasure had existed for an indeterminable period of time within the blood immortal legacy zone. One of its streamers was sealed with the character Jai. Its power was clearly enough to shake heaven and earth, and the blood immortal of the ancient Doom clan had desired to use it to drink the blood of the Jai. Meng Hao remembered the meat jelly's shocked reaction upon first seeing the flag. Considering all of that, how could Meng Hao not realize how astounding it was? In reality, he did not have the requisite cultivation base to even touch the treasure, let alone employ its power. However, once his 10th Tao pillar appeared, he had been able to sense the parched call of the flag of 3 streamers. Now that he thought back, he realized that its thirst was a thirst for destruction. In fact, instead of saying that Meng Hao had employed the power of the flag of 3 streamers, it would be more accurate to say because of Meng Hao's new qualifications. The flag was able to borrow his hands, and his power to appear once again in the sky. Furthermore, instead of saying that Meng Hao had slain a core formation cultivator, it would be more accurate to say that the flag of 3 streamers was the one to exterminate the azure-masked cultivator. Even the appearance of just one of the flag's 3 streamers caused Meng Hao's cultivation base to wither and had injured his soul. That moment in which he had hovered in midair, facing down the Black Land's cultivators and the crowds from the southern domain, everything about him had appeared normal. In reality, he had been extremely weak. Thanks to the transformation powers of the meat jelly, he had been able to force out the sensation of a powerful aura. No one had been able to sense even the slightest clue as to his true state. Considering that and their other misgivings, no one had dared to make a move against him. In addition, the flag of 3 streamers hadn't even fully appeared. It had only been a phantom image that appeared to be a divine ability. Therefore, most people had assumed that it was not a magical treasure, but some technique. Furthermore, no one had made a connection between him drying up the Tao geyser and the appearance of the flag. Upon waking up just now, he had spit up a glob of impure qi, and his eyes had begun to shine. His cultivation base was now recovered by 80 to 90%. Based on how fast it was going, it wouldn't be long before it was completely recovered. The injury to his soul, however, was impossible to deal with. He could only exercise caution and not cause any further injury. Injuring the soul is like sowing karma. If the day comes in which I can break into the nascent soul stage, then the karma will be reaped. Meng Hao sat there thoughtfully for a moment, then took a deep breath and slowly stood up. He walked out of the immortal's cave to find that it was raining again. The murmuring rain carried with it the cold of autumn. Meng Hao stared off into the distance, his long azure robe fluttering in the rainy wind. Core formation. His eyes glittered. There was really no need to think of the difficulty of reaching the nascent soul stage. Suddenly, he thought of Wang Tengfei's Tao protector, the core formation cultivator Wang Zifan. All those years ago, a mere glance from him had nearly killed Meng Hao. As of now, Meng Hao was confident that if he faced him again, the man would be stunned. Lost in thought, Meng Hao recalled Grand Elder Aoyang and He Luohua from the Reliance sect. He also thought of the other core formation cultivators from the state of Zhao. Gradually, his eyes began to gleam. I have 10 Tao pillars and a perfect foundation. I can even battle the core formation stage. I may be cut off from the spiritual power of heaven and earth, but in return I am the most powerful person in this stage. I must continue down this path. I have a perfect foundation. Next is a perfect gold core. The thought of it left him panting. As for the injury to my soul, that will just have to wait until later. He had deeper comprehension now. In the southern domain's cultivation world, core formation was divided into 3 levels: violet at the top, then orange, crimson, green, and mixed at the bottom. Based on various methods and the variety of latent talent, different cores could be formed. For instance, the violet fate sect's violet chi from the east was able to produce a violet core. As for other sects and clans, they naturally had their own secret magics that gave their chosen disciples a chance to produce a violet core. Different cores would produce different core chi. Of course, the higher the level of the core, the more likely it would be to produce core chi, and sooner. Obviously, the core chi would be much more powerful as well. Generally speaking, among cultivators with a violet core, 90% would be able to cultivate core chi in the early core formation stage. For orange, crimson, and green cores, they were monochromatic cores and would generally produce core chi during the mid-core formation stage. As for the 3 azure-masked black lands cultivators, they were obviously chosen and had somehow been able to force the superior power of a violet core out of their orange cores. Regarding mixed cores, they contained a variety of colors and were the lowest of the entire stage. Of course, Meng Hao knew that when it came to the perfect core, it was gold. Just as there had been a perfect foundation pill, there was also a perfect gold core pill. After forming a violet core and then consuming the perfect gold core pill, he would have a high likelihood of rising to a gold core. When that happened, he would have to face tribulation lightning. Before, such things had been far away from Meng Hao, but now that he had 10 perfect Tao pillars and had completed the great circle of the perfect foundation, core formation was just around the corner. He looked thoughtfully out into the windy rain. Finally, he flicked his sleeve to gather together the poison mist from within the immortal's cave. It collected into the palm of his hand, after which he placed it into his bag of holding. Then, his body flickered as he moved off into the distance. Several days later, Meng Hao hovered in midair, frowning. On his head, the meat jelly transformed into a hat was jabbering on and on. Bullies, 3 bullies. Meng Hao, you're picking on me. You've taken advantage of my feelings. You're taking advantage of my assistance. It had come out 2 days ago, relentlessly requesting bullies. However, out here in the western region of the southern domain, there were no cultivators. They'd all left after the disappearance of the Tao geyser. Meng Hao hadn't been able to find any new bullies. Therefore, the meat jelly was furious. How can you be so immoral, so wrong? It's unconscionable. My bullies, my 3 bullies. The more it talked, the more wronged it sounded. Meng Hao coughed lightly. His face was unsightly, but after all those years, especially after his time in the Violet Fate sect, he had gotten used to the meat jelly's frequent harassment. Therefore, he simply allowed it to chatter on endlessly. After 3 more days of garrulous talking, the meat jelly finally paused for a moment. Meng Hao cleared his throat and began to speak. Didn't you say the parrot can emerge from the copper mirror after I reach core formation? He'd been waiting 3 days to ask this. Correct, the meat jelly screeched. After reaching core formation, that damned bastard will appear. I've been waiting forever. I will definitely convert it. In a frenzy, it began chattering ceaselessly about the mystical parrot instead of bullies. Meng Hao relaxed. He had found a way to handle the meat jelly, keep giving it conversation topics. 1 or 2 topics later, it would forget its previous concern. Leading it back and forth was the easiest way to deal with it. Meng Hao flew along as the meat jelly hat prattled. The buzzing went on for 7 days before it finally paused to rest for a moment. Before it could, Meng Hao said, "Who do you think is more incredible, you or that parrot?" Offended, it went crazy again. Trembling fury rose to the heavens. "Me, of course. It's grand, handsome, extraordinary, intelligent me. That shameless bastard of a bird is nothing. I'm gonna convert it, knock him down." "How is the Li clan patriarch doing lately?" Meng Hao quickly asked. "Has he been obedient?" The meat jelly gaped. "The Li clan patriarch, damnation. He hasn't been obedient at all. His immorality is without limit. I have to lecture him." It realized how to vent its anger. With a bang, it disappeared into Meng Hao's bag of holding and the mask, filled with ardor. Meng Hao was finally able to breathe a long sigh of relief. At long last, some peace and quiet. He looked around. He didn't intend to immediately head back to the Violet Fate sect. Instead, he would visit some cultivator cities and find some pill auctions where he could earn some spirit stones. Even as he was sizing up the surroundings, his expression suddenly flickered. He looked at his bag of holding, then pulled out his Furnace Lord medallion emitting a flickering violet glow. He pressed it, and an archaic voice filled his head. "Hey kid, have you had enough fun? It's time to stop fooling around. I want you back in 4 days. Trial by fire for Violet Furnace Lord promotion begins then in the Celestial Land. The frequency of these trials by fire is completely up to my mood. It starts 4 days from now, and everyone who joins has a chance to become a Violet Furnace Lord. If you don't get back ASAP, then you'll lose your chance to participate." Chapter 277, Eastern Emergence Mountain. Meng Hao stared blankly at the Furnace Lord medallion as the voice faded. Whoever was speaking seemed very familiar with him. The tone was idle chit-chat, which surprised him even more. However, the voice was clearly that of a stranger. Meng Hao was sure he had never heard it before. He frowned, then transformed into a beam of light. Before flying far, he suddenly stopped and looked at the medallion. His eyes narrowed, then shone with bits of fury. "I know who that voice belongs to. The only person with the authority to start a trial by fire for Violet Furnace Lord promotion, completely on his mood, other than the Violet Furnace Lords is." "Pill demon," Meng Hao ground his teeth. He had really had no option but to go. "My bedevilment pill, my 200 million spirit stones." Thinking about the vast amount of spirit stones made Meng Hao's heart seize with pain. It was as if someone had taken a valuable treasure right out of his pocket and dangled it in front of his face, while he was powerless to resist. Within the Violet Fate sect, only Pill Demon besides the Violet Furnace Lords might know he was Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. The bedevilment pill could fool others, but not Pill Demon. Considering Pill Demon's position within the Violet Fate sect, if he wanted to know something, it would be virtually impossible to keep the information from him. Actually, Meng Hao hadn't really done anything to conceal his identity as Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. He had simply not taken the initiative to proclaim who he was. After all, his original intention in participating in the pill auction was to increase his reputation a bit. He had never imagined that the bedevilment pill would cause such a stir. His subsequent caution had caused the entire southern domain to begin to speculate as to who Grandmaster Pill Cauldron really was. As he looked at the Furnace Lord medallion, he recalled the voice that had just entered his head and let out a soft sigh. Obviously, Pill Demon had known all along that he was Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. Meng Hao was suddenly furious. "So you knew the whole time that I was famous in all of the southern domain. Any sect would love to have me work for them as Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. In that case, why didn't you give me my spirit stones?" There was little to do about it, though. Pill Demon was like a patriarch in the East Pill Division. If he wanted to cheat him, there was really nothing Meng Hao could do about it. He couldn't simply up and demand to have spirit stones. Back in Yunji County, the stewards were always miserly. It seems the same principle exists in the cultivation world. The more spirit stones they have, the stingier they get. Meng Hao sighed, then proceeded forward. "You owe me 200 million spirit stones. Right now I don't even have a single spirit stone left," thought Meng Hao, his face long. When he thought about his empty bag of holding and the 200 million spirit stones, he just couldn't keep his cool. 4 days to get back. I'm much further than that now," he sped up. "Trial by fire for promotion to Violet Furnace Lord. Could batty old Pill Demon perhaps feel guilty for taking my spirit stones, so he's giving me a chance to become a Violet Furnace Lord?" His eyes suddenly began to glitter, and his heart palpitated with eagerness. He knew that becoming a Violet Furnace Lord would come with a host of benefits. The Violet Fate Sect had only 8 Violet Furnace Lords. Finally, there would be a 9th. Meng Hao began to breathe heavily, and he pushed himself even faster. 4 days. No matter what, I have to get back to the sect in 4 days. He shot off into the distance, a prismatic beam charging at high speed. He had risen to prominence in the western region. His cultivation base had climbed to new heights. Now he was being called back to the sect. All of it seemed to smack of some hidden agenda. He decided not to be concerned about the suddenness of the whole matter. He sighed again and pushed down his concerns. His cultivation base was now much different than when he had left the sect, but he could use the Tao Geyser to explain that. After considering the matter for some time, Meng Hao found it unlikely that the sect was plotting against him. After all, the Violet Fate Sect was one of the great sects of the southern domain. If they really harbored ill intentions toward him and deigned to use some sort of tricks on him, then there was nothing he could do about it. They would be able to seize him with little effort. Besides, he had been in the East Pill Division for more than 5 years. He understood the sect fairly well and knew both the exceptional areas of the East Pill Division, as well as its shortcomings. Thinking of all these things, his apprehension lessened quite a bit. However, he was no less cautious than ever. Taking advantage of every teleportation portal he could, he made his way back toward the Violet Fate Sect. Every teleportation portal he arrived at belonged to some sect or clan. All he had to do was flash his Furnace Lord medallion, and they would let him pass. They were happy to let a Furnace Lord use their teleportation devices. 4 days passed in a flash. It was late in the night of the 3rd day, in the moment when dawn of the 4th day was about to break, that Meng Hao, windswept and covered in dust, arrived in the region of the Violet Fate Sect. He had passed through over 20 teleportation portals and had crossed nearly half of the southern domain. Batty old pill demon. If he gets to choose when the trial by fire starts, then why the hell did he pick 4 days? Meng Hao wasn't in a good mood, and was in fact slightly depressed. Anyone who used over 20 teleportation portals in a brief 4-day period would be just as completely exhausted. Thankfully, he had 10 Tao pillars and much stronger spiritual sense. With his previous cultivation base, being teleported so many times in such a short period of time would have left him painfully exhausted. Meng Hao would rather have spent the 4th day in meditation and rest, but had no time. The constant flying and use of teleportation portals wasn't without benefit, though. Because of the constant rotation of his cultivation base, his 10 Tao pillars were completely stable. He could now break through to core formation at any time. His breathing rough, Meng Hao shot through Violet Fate Sect territory. Dawn light climbed up into the sky as he flew along. Occasionally, he would encounter other cultivators who, upon seeing his clothing, would look shocked, and then respectfully clasp hands and bow to him. This was Violet Fate Sect territory, so all the other sects and clans therein were connected in some way to the Violet Fate Sect. As such, his clothing and the identity they heralded garnered deep respect. Off in the distance, he could see the Violet Fate Sect and the enormous statue of Reverend Violet East. It was still early morning, but Meng Hao was worn out and in a rotten mood. As he approached the sect, the previously still air suddenly began to ripple. Meng Hao ignored the ripples and continued to fly at top speed. The ripples spread out for a moment, and then soundlessly disappeared. These ripples would instantly slay any cultivator of the nascent soul stage, or below, who was not of the Violet Fate Sect. Meng Hao whistled through the air within the sect. Along the way, he ran into quite a few disciples of the Violet Qi Division. They looked at Meng Hao with expressions of complete astonishment. Seeing the expressions, Meng Hao got a bad feeling. Suddenly, he turned a corner and found himself face to face with a chosen disciple he knew from the Violet Qi Division, who immediately said, "Fang Mu, what are you doing back?" Meng Hao paused for a moment, turning back to look at him. "Hey, Brother Song, I was out of the sect to gain some experience, but now the training is over." "You just got back from training," was the reply. "You'd better get to Eastern Emergence Mountain as fast as you can. All the Furnace Lords and Master Alchemists of the East Pill Division headed over there at dawn. The word is that there's a Violet Furnace Lord trial by fire." Eastern Emergence Mountain. An image of the mountain immediately appeared in Meng Hao's mind. It was in the eastern part of the state of Eastern Emergence, quite some distance from the Violet Fate Sect. Yeah, the trial by fire for Violet Furnace Lord promotion has caused a big stir among the other great sects and clans. Members of the senior generation arrived quite some time ago to observe the proceedings. As the words were still coming out Song's mouth, Meng Hao took a deep breath, clasped hands, and then disappeared in a beam of bright light. He sent his spiritual sense out, and found that there really were no master alchemists present at all within the East Pill division. He immediately shot off into the distance. "Batty old pill demon," he said through gritted teeth, "why can't you explain things clearly?" Despite his exhaustion, he shot forward at the highest speed possible. Eastern Emergence Mountain was the most prominent mountain within the state of Eastern Emergence. It towered up into the sky, and throughout the year, its upper half was enveloped in white clouds that appeared celestial in nature. Many legends about this mountain existed within the state of Eastern Emergence. Its peak was covered with ice and snow. Mortals would be incapable of climbing up to such a place. Furthermore, the mountain was guarded year-round by Violet Fate sect cultivators, making it a restricted area. Even Violet Fate sect disciples were not allowed to climb the mountain unless they had a special command medallion. Obviously, outsiders would never be allowed onto the mountain unless some solemn Violet Fate sect matter was underway. According to one rumor, 10,000 years ago, the Violet Fate sect wasn't located where it was now, but rather on Eastern Emergence Mountain. Eventually, because of various circumstances, the sect had moved away. Regardless of that, Eastern Emergence Mountain was under constant guard by the Violet Fate sect. In fact, it was less of a restricted area and more of a holy place. Currently, an enormous pill furnace rested on the peak of the mountain. It was covered with countless protruding magical symbols and emanated an archaic air. An air of time seemed to spread out from within, an air that felt thousands of years old. Were Meng Hao here, he would recognize this pill furnace. This was the same one that appeared in illusory form above the East Pill division and led into the Violet Fate celestial land. This was the actual pill furnace itself. Surrounding the pill furnace were the 1,000 master alchemists of the East Pill division, the 100 furnace lords, and the 8 violet furnace lords, including Sohe and Lin Heilong. Everyone was here. Close by were representatives of the other 4 great sects, as well as the 3 great clans, along with members from other sects who devoted themselves to alchemy. Elders from all these organizations sat cross-legged atop the mountain peak, waiting. This chapter was sponsored by Roy Treves, Alec Ray, Martin Allen Vure, Robert Kunze, and Alexander Hintz. And Sohe is the Violet Furnace Lord who assessed the bedevilment pill in the auction, and knows that Fang Mu is Pill Cauldron. Lin Heilong is the most senior of the Violet Furnace Lords, the one who presided over the meeting with Eternal Mountain. Chapter 278, The 10th Candidate. A Violet Furnace Lord promotion was not only a grand occasion for the Violet Fate sect, but for the entire southern domain. This was not just because a Violet Furnace Lord represented a peak position, but also because a promotion to Violet Furnace Lord was actually an apprentice-accepting ceremony of Grandmaster Pill Demon. Currently, there were 8 Violet Furnace Lords in the Violet Fate sect, and all of them were novitiates of Grandmaster Pill Demon. This ceremony was actually a way of formally becoming an apprentice. Some disciples like Chu Yuyan and Ding Xin were qualified to become Grandmaster Pill Demon's apprentices directly. However, this didn't meet with the approval of the East Pill Division's alchemists. Alchemists favored those who relied on hard work, starting as apprentice alchemists, becoming master alchemists, then furnace lords, and finally Pill Demon's apprentices by joining the Violet Furnace Lords. Chu Yuyan was a bit different. Because of her skill in pill concocting, she had a good reputation in the East Pill Division. Add in her incredible beauty, and the alchemists were more easily able to accept her. Despite that, to Chu Yuyan, promotion to Violet Furnace Lord was incredibly important. She stood there in the crowd, her eyes glowing with determination. This was her chance to become a Violet Furnace Lord, and she was determined to succeed. Her gaze came to rest upon a man who was standing behind one of the Violet Furnace Lords. He was middle-aged, and his face was flawless and handsome. His expression was tranquil, and he wore the robe of a Furnace Lord. A faint medicinal aroma wafted off of him. He was clearly beyond ordinary. Lonely arrogance showed in his face. His expression and appearance matched how Chu Yuyan imagined Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. He will be my biggest competition for promotion to Violet Furnace Lord, she thought with an inward sigh as she looked at him. This proud, aloof man was like a chosen among the Furnace Lords. His name was Yifeimu. Among the Furnace Lords, Yifeimu was well known as having incredible skill in the Tao of alchemy. His skill was the type only seen once in 1,000 years, and he was generally acknowledged to be the alchemist most likely to be promoted to Violet Furnace Lord. Upon joining the sect many years ago, he had immediately caused a huge stir in the East Pill division. Furthermore, Violet Furnace Lord Yi Yunchen took special notice of his talent and showed him favor. This was mostly because they shared the same surname, Yi, too. Yi Yunchen's name in Chinese is Chinese letter I Yun Tian. Yi is a surname which also means leaf. Yun means cloud. Tian means sky or heaven. With assistance the entire time, he became the #1 apprentice alchemist at the time, then the #1 master alchemist. Finally, he became a furnace lord, whereupon not much was heard about him for many years. According to the rumors, his skill in the Tao of alchemy had reached the peak of the furnace lord rank, and he was halfway to being a violet furnace lord already. Even more stunning was that it wasn't just his Tao of alchemy that was so high. He had long since reached the core formation stage. He hadn't cultivated core chi yet, but many people speculated that if he hadn't devoted himself so much to alchemy, he would already be above the mid-core formation stage. In this violet furnace lord trial by fire, Yi Feimu was viewed as the most likely candidate to win. Second was Chu Yuyan. There were other candidates, but the general consensus was that the main competition would be between these two. Chu Yuyan had one advantage. She was an apprentice of Pill Demon. As for Yi Feimu, his advantage, which even Chu Yuyan had to acknowledge, was that he had the support of 90% of the Furnace Lords, as well as 5 of the Violet Furnace Lords. In addition, Pill Demon himself had praised him on past occasions. All of this really put Yi Feimu in a superior position. Even more importantly, chosen like Yi Feimu had been talked a lot about in the past year. More and more people outside the sect were spreading rumors that he was Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. Yi Feimu never made any comments on the subject, which of course caused even more rumors to spread. Soon, everyone was convinced that Pill Cauldron was none other than Yi Feimu. In fact, many people felt that the reason he sealed his pill with the Cauldron Chinese letter was because of his name, Feimu, Chinese letter. The characters Chinese letter and Chinese letter can both be seen in the character Chinese letter. Even many of the Furnace Lords agreed with this, as well as a few of the Violet Furnace Lords, who began to pay closer attention to him because of it. Chu Yuyan was very focused on the matter of Pill Cauldron. She had even gone to visit Yi Feimu to ask about it. While he hadn't openly admitted that he was Pill Cauldron, he had vaguely implied that such was the case. How could Chu Yuyan not have understood his meaning? After finally resolving the issue, she actually felt a little bit disappointed. It was an indescribable feeling, sort of like waking to find that reality was very different from the dream world you had just been in. Even if he is Grandmaster Pill Cauldron, I will fight with everything I have to become a Violet Furnace Lord, she thought, taking a deep breath and deepening her resolve. For some strange reason, as soon as she made her mind up, the image of another person suddenly appeared in her mind. Fang Mu. Why am I thinking about him? She frowned, dispelling the image of Fang Mu from her thoughts. It was early morning on Eastern Emergence Mountain. Cool sunlight fell upon the snowy mountain peak. The enormous pill furnace emitted an archaic aura of time, and the surroundings were very quiet. The 8 Violet Furnace Lords of the East Pill Division sat cross-legged. Behind them were the Furnace Lords and Master Alchemists, over 1,000 people altogether. Also present off to the side were representatives from the other sects and clans, here to observe the ceremonies. If someone was promoted to Violet Furnace Lord, they would witness the event and then announce throughout the southern domain that there was a 9th Violet Furnace Lord, and that Grandmaster Pill Demon had accepted a new apprentice. The hour has arrived, cried Lin Heilong, the most senior of the Violet Furnace Lords. As soon as his words rang out, the sound of bells filled the mountain peak. The clouds above roiled, forming together to form an ancient-looking face that stared down at everyone. At the same time, the enormous pill furnace began to emit a gentle glow. Multicolored beams of light shot out, twisting around to fill the entire area with brightness. From off in the distance, it looked as if the entirety of Eastern Emergence Mountain was covered by a massive, illusory pill furnace. Ripples appeared in the air, out from which a figure emerged to stand atop the pill furnace. He wore a white robe, and his features were ordinary. However, his aura was anything but. He gave off a sense of ultimate refinement. The air around him distorted as he appeared, as if he didn't quite belong in the world. The sleeves of his simple robe were embroidered with images of pill furnaces. His hair was white, and his gaze soft as he looked around at everyone. A smile appeared on his archaic face. Fellow Taoists of the southern domain, Many thanks for coming to attend my ceremony of accepting a new apprentice. I'm unable to attend in person, so I've embodied my divine will to come in my place. I hope you can all forgive me for this. This, of course, was the man who occupied the ultimate position in the Tao of Alchemy in the Southern Domain, Grandmaster Pill Demon. His voice caused all the disciples of the East Pill Division to salute respectfully, including Master Alchemists, Furnace Lords, and Violet Furnace Lords. Grandmaster Pill Demon was essentially the patriarch of the East Pill Division. Grandmaster Eternal Mountain hadn't come, but instead, Grand Elder Zio Xifeng, whose cultivation base was at the great circle of the late nascent soul stage. He laughed, then coolly said, "No need to be so polite, Grandmaster Pill Demon. Accepting an apprentice and promoting a Violet Furnace Lord is a grand event for the entire Southern Domain. Zio wouldn't think of not coming." He occupied a noble and prestigious position within the Golden Frost sect and was nearly 900 years old, making him a sub-patriarch. He was not yet 1,000 years old and had not defied the heavens. If in the next 100 years he could break through to the spirit severing stage, then he would truly become a patriarch. If not, then he would simply pass away in meditation and become one with the Tao. Next to him were 10 or more Golden Frost sect cultivators, including Fatty. Right now, Fatty looked extremely nervous and didn't show the slightest hint of being lively or excited. In fact, he was acting unprecedentedly well behaved. The person he feared the most in the entire Golden Frost sect was none other than Grand Elder Zio. After hearing that Grandmaster Pill Demon was accepting a new apprentice, I came as fast as possible, said Patriarch Violet Civ of the Black Civ sect, smiling. Thankfully, I didn't arrive late. He sat cross-legged off to the side. Next to him was Zhou Jai as well as Han Bei, who was currently looking around, sizing up the surroundings. It seemed as if she were looking for someone. Violet Furnace Lord promotion was a huge event, something that hadn't occurred for a very long time. It was only natural for the other great sects to show up. Also present was Taoist Wu Sheng, second of the Solitary Sword sect's 3 sword lords who sat cross-legged, surrounded by Solitary Sword sect disciples. Chen Fan was there, as was the woman Shan Ling. 3. Shan Ling was introduced way back in chapter 180. With a slight smile, Taoist Wu Sheng said, "You're truly too polite, Grandmaster Pill Demon. For a Grandmaster to accept an apprentice is a legacy of the Tao of Alchemy that any disciple in the Southern Domain would covet. How could I not humbly come to bear witness to such an event?" His voice was calm. He was an honored senior member of the Solitary Sword sect who was qualified to look down on a myriad of other sects. However, in front of Grandmaster Pill Demon, all of his pride turned into respect. The representative from the Blood Demon sect was a withered old man in a red Taoist robe. He had silver hair, and his skin was shriveled. He emanated a thick death aura, and his eyes had no pupils. They were completely white. He didn't say anything in response to Pill Demon's words. He merely smiled and nodded his head. This blind old man was incredibly famous in the Southern Domain. He was the 3rd demon of the Blood Demon sect, Tu Luo, the Corpse Demon. The only other person from the Blood Demon sect to come to Eastern Emergence Mountain was Li Shiki. The main representatives from the 3 great clans were all of the great circle of the nascent soul stage. All of them said various words in response to Grandmaster Pill Demon. Afterwards, Grandmaster Pill Demon smiled and said, "In total, there will be 10 cultivators participating in the Violet Furnace Lord trial by fire. Candidates, please step forward." His voice was solemn, and as it filled the mountain top, Chu Yuyan Yifemu and 7 other Furnace Lords stepped out from the crowd one by one. They walked over to stand in front of the pill furnace. Including Chu Yuyan and Yifemu, there were only 9 alchemists standing there, not the 10 of which Pill Demon had spoken. The cultivators of the East Pill Division immediately noticed this, as did the representatives of the other sects. Chu Yuyan and the other candidates for Violet Furnace Lord promotion exchanged glances, silently wondering who the 10th participant was. Before anyone could say anything, a beam of light appeared in the distance. It shot through the air toward the mountain peak, then transformed into a panting Meng Hao. Everyone looked over at him, although he didn't care about that. He glanced around and immediately noticed Chu Yuyan and the other 8 standing in front of the pill furnace, as well as Grandmaster Pill Demon. As far as Meng Hao was concerned, Pill Demon was just some old man that he didn't recognize. "The 10th candidate has arrived," said Grandmaster Pill Demon, his expression the same as ever. "Fang Mu, step on over." Hearing this, Meng Hao walked over without hesitation to join the other 9. Then he looked up at Pill Demon, bottling up his frustration and helplessness. Yifeimu's name in Chinese is Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. Yifeimu, Yi is a surname which also means leaf. Fei is a negation word that basically means not. Mu means I. Yi Yunshan's name in Chinese is Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, I Yun Tian. Yi is a surname which also means leaf. Yun means cloud. Tian means sky or heaven. Chapter 279, Opening the Pill Furnace. This was the same voice from the medallion 4 days ago. The expressions on everyone's faces made it clear. This person was Grandmaster Pill Demon. In Meng Hao's eyes, Grandmaster Pill Demon looked completely ordinary. He possessed no transcendent demeanor, no powerful domineering fierceness, just a regular old man. Then, Meng Hao thought about the 200 million spirit stones and his mood worsened. Of course, he couldn't mention anything about that now. Next, he thought about how he had been told to return in 4 days, but hadn't been told where to go. He had rushed over to the sect only to be forced to scramble back in the opposite direction. It had left him completely drained. All of these depressing thoughts caused Meng Hao's expression to flicker, with a bit of anger and frustration. Chu Yuyan looked at him and let out a light snort. She looked away, ignoring him, gazing instead at Yifeimu. Meng Hao stood silently. Most of the other 7 just glanced at him, and then paid him no further attention as they focused on not allowing excitement regarding the Violet Furnace Lord promotion to show on their face. And Zehai looked at Meng Hao, barely perceptibly smiling. He knew Fang Mu was Grandmaster Pill Cauldron and how Pill Demon felt about him. Pill Demon had given Fang Mu free rein to enjoy himself. If Fang Mu wanted to reveal his identity, he could. If not, that was his business. As far as the representatives from the other sects and clans, Patriarch Violet Civ was the first one to give a friendly nod to Meng Hao. Zhou face was expressionless, but when Hanbei looked at him, she smiled, her face as beautiful as a flower. The look she gave him was noticed by quite a few others. Chu Yuyan glanced over and saw it, and then frowned, although she wasn't sure why. For some reason, she just was not in a good mood. Fatty's eyes were wide as he looked at Meng Hao, then Chu Yuyan and then back to Meng Hao. Finally, he glanced at Hanbei out of the corner of his eyes, and his expression filled with admiration. As for what he was thinking, only he himself knew. The representative from the Wang clan was an old woman, her face covered with wrinkles. So, this is the alchemist Fang who rose to fame a few days ago in the western region. Behind the old woman, other Wang clan members sat cross-legged, including Wang Tengfei. His expression was somber, and the entire time, he hadn't even looked once at Chu Yuyan. She reacted to this with utmost calm, and not the least bit of negativity. It seemed as if she had placed the matters from previous years completely behind her. A hero at such a young age. Someone laughed from within the Song clan representatives. It was none other than eccentric Song, who sat far off toward the edge. He laughed again as he looked Meng Hao up and down, measuring him up. Sitting around him were a dozen or so members of the Song clan. Song Yunchu wasn't there, but Song Jia was. She of course was. Meng Hao's fiancée, at least theoretically speaking. There she was sitting right next to eccentric Song. Meng Hao hadn't seen her for years now. She was slim and graceful with an elegant expression on her face. She was beautiful like an orchid in full bloom. However, there was a slight furrow in her brow caused by years of gloomy thoughts. It made her entire person seem like an orchid, but a dark one. The Li clan representative was a senior member of the clan, Li Guobang, who was over 500 years of age, and had a cultivation base at the late nascent soul stage. He was incredibly powerful and influential within the Li clan. Congratulations, Grandmaster Pill Demon, your Violet Fate sect really has produced some amazing disciples. Sitting next to Li Guobang amidst the other Li clan disciples was Li Dai, who frowned as he looked over at Meng Hao. Grandmaster Pill Demon smiled, but didn't respond to any of the comments. He looked over Meng Hao and the 9 others. Heilong, please explain the rules. With that, he stepped off to the side and sat down cross-legged. Lin Heilong, the most senior ranking of the Violet Furnace Lords, hastily stood up. He clasped hands and bowed to Grandmaster Pill Demon, then turned toward Meng Hao and the others. Violet Furnace Lord promotion is about more than just collecting medicinal plants, concocting pills, memorizing formulas, testing the cultivation base, engaging the Tao of alchemy. It is a trial by fire. I myself have experienced this trial by fire, as have all of the other Violet Furnace Lords you see here today. Only by rising above your peers can you achieve the rank of Violet Furnace Lord. However, since ancient times, the East Pill division of the Violet Fate sect has held a Violet Furnace Lord test 79 times. Down to this day, Only 17 of those tests resulted in a successful promotion. In other words, in the other 62 tests, all the candidates failed, unable to make the furnace turn violet. Therefore, despite being qualified to participate in this trial by fire, there is a 70% possibility that you will fail. A serious look was written on his face as he slowly looked over Meng Hao and the others, one by one. Meng Hao's face was placid. He was physically tired but also excited. He had previously read that throughout the history of the Violet Fate sect, there had only been 17 alchemists promoted to Violet Furnace Lord. 2 of them ended up forsaking the sect, one of whom was Eternal Mountain, the other was surnamed Liu. Of the 15 others in the past 1,000 years, 5 had perished. 2 left the sect to gain experience and then disappeared without a trace. Grandmaster Pill Demon had personally searched for them, but hadn't been able to turn up a single clue. The only thing he was certain of was that they weren't dead. For some reason, though, they had disappeared from the southern domain. Lin Heilong continued, "Even if you fail, you will be able to seize good fortune within the test. During the Violet Furnace Lord trial by fire, your life will not be in any danger, but you may only participate in this test once in your life. If you fail, you will never get a second chance." Therefore, since ancient times, many alchemists have left personally created pill formulas and other personal information about the Tao of alchemy within the test. These things have been passed down within the test for many years, available only to those qualified to participate in the test. For example, I remember how I personally left behind information regarding my understanding and speculations of the 3 mortalities pill. Lin Heilong's eyes filled with a look of recollection for a moment. The location of the trial by fire is a mountain in the celestial land. At the base of the mountain is the Mother of Furnaces. This Mother of Furnaces is the first stroke of good fortune of the 10 of you will encounter. Inside, you will find your own life furnace. More precisely, at the same time that you select a furnace, that furnace will be selecting you. To complete the test, you must make your life furnace turn violet. If you do that, and are able to ascend to the peak of the mountain, then you will earn the right to be called Violet Furnace Lord. Unfortunately, only one person can earn such a right. If more than one person is able to reach the peak, then the final decision will be made by the Furnace Lords and the Violet Furnace Lords. Their approval will be critical in the decision of who becomes the next Violet Furnace Lord. Lin Heilong gave deep, meaningful looks to Meng Hao and the others as he spoke his final words. The pill furnace behind you is a precious treasure forged thousands upon thousands of years ago by Reverend Violet East. Inside is a celestial land and a towering celestial mountain. There are 10 paths on the mountain, which is divided into 4 regions. Each of the 4 regions contains different trials and tests. Use your Tao of alchemy to pass through them. Based on your achievements, the color of your furnaces will darken. I must remind you, everything you do within the trial by fire will be seen clearly by everyone on the outside. Do your best. I truly hope that this trial by fire will result in one of you becoming my 9th junior brother in the East Pill Division. With that, he turned to look at Pill Demon. Pill Demon gave a slight nod. Lin Heilong flicked his wide sleeve and said, "Chant the alchemy scripture to open the pill furnace." As his voice rang out, the eyes of all the alchemists, Furnace Lord and Violet Furnace Lord alike, immediately closed. Their lips moved slightly, and an indistinct sound filled the air. It was impossible to understand or hear clearly. Even a nascent soul cultivator wouldn't be able to comprehend it. Only alchemists of the East Pill Division would be able to make out that this mysterious so-called alchemy scripture was none other than the alchemy Tao transmutation incantation. Seemingly in sync with the droning sound, Eastern Emergence Mountain began to shake. Multicolored light spread out everywhere, filling the sky. Countless faces suddenly appeared within the clouds, their expressions dignified. From their mouths emerged indistinct symbols. The sound echoed about, causing the sky to be filled with bright colors. The land around the mountain was peaceful. However, a mist sprang up, with Eastern Emergence Mountain at its center. It rolled out rapidly, quickly covering the entire state of Eastern Emergence. All the land and all the living things in it were submerged within the mist. As the mist spread out, Violet Chi Division disciples flew out in all directions to keep guard and maintain peace. Up in the sky, colorful lights danced about, beneath which clouds and mist covered the land like a sea. Eastern Emergence Mountain rose up from it like an island, towering up. Far off in the distance, the enormous statue of Reverend Violet East also towered up above the sea of clouds, looking, not like a mountain, but an enormous giant watching over the land. "The pill furnace is opened. Enter," cried Lin Heilong. The pill furnace emitting buzzing sounds. In the blink of an eye, its side began to ripple and grow transparent. It looked almost like a waterfall. Yifemu took a deep breath and then stepped into the pill furnace, the first one to do so. He disappeared into the rippling water, followed by Chu Yuyan, whose eyes radiated determination. Meng Hao looked back at Grandmaster Pill Demon, who sat there cross-legged, his eyes closed. Without a word and without the slightest hesitation, he entered the waterfall. Coldness filled his body and it began to grow transparent. He disappeared. The other 7 candidates entered as well, vanishing immediately. Although it might seem like these 7 were people of little note, in reality, to be qualified to participate in the trial by fire showed how extraordinary they were. Such qualifications meant that they were inherently famous, the best of the best in terms of both personality and the Tao of alchemy. Chapter 280, Life Furnace. The Violet Fate Celestial Land, the holiest place in the sect. Many legends surrounded this celestial land. All involved the almighty Reverend Violet East, who founded the sect tens of thousands of years ago. Many years after the sect's founding, this celestial land gradually came to be the location where the Violet Fate sect grew its medicinal herbs. Eventually, more types of medicinal plants came to grow there than in the entire rest of the southern domain put together. That was the location of the East Pill Division's Tao Reserve. Within the Violet Fate Celestial Land, at the far end of the limitless stretches of medicinal plant fields, was a mountain so tall it seemed to have no top. This mountain, which could be seen from an incredible distance, was known as Violet East Mountain. According to legend, Reverend Violet East sat atop this mountain and slowly passed away in meditation. Afterward it became a place of pilgrimage. At the mountain's foot was an enormous pill furnace glowing with a 7-colored light. It looked exactly like the furnace on Eastern Emergence Mountain, except more real and emanating an archaic aura. The air at the mountain's foot rippled like liquid. Multiple figures emerged, and when the ripples faded, Meng Hao, Chu Yuyan, Yifemu and the others stood there. In front of them was the shockingly high mountain. Starting at the foot of the mountain, 10 small paths zigzagged up toward the top. Each path began there and then took different routes to the top. As to which path to select, that would be based on the feeling each candidate got from the paths. In any case, it was easy to see that there was little difference in the difficulty of traversing the various paths. Meng Hao looked toward the peak of the imposing mountain. Its higher regions were blurry, the peak invisible, nor was it possible to estimate the mountain's height. Meng Hao wasn't the only one looking up at it. The other 9 people around him, including Chu Yuyan and Yifemu, were gazing toward it. Other than the 10 paths, the main thing that filled their vision was the enormous pill furnace. After some time, Yifemu's eyes glittered with determination. He glanced at the others. His supercilious expression said he would become a Violet Furnace Lord, that none of the candidates could match him. Pride and dignity filled him with complete confidence that the Violet Furnace Lord title belonged only to him. He shot toward the pill furnace and sat down cross-legged in the spot directly east of it. Chu Yuyan looked at him and took a deep breath. Determination glowed in her eyes. "You might be Grandmaster Pill Cauldron, but now I go up against you." She closed her eyes and sat down next to the pill furnace. Meng Hao and the others approached in selected positions to sit down. The first phase had begun, time to acquire their life furnaces. Meng Hao had no clue how to get the furnace, but as soon as the 10 sat down around the 7-colored furnace, the glow began to flicker, then suddenly shot toward them. A tremor ran through Meng Hao's body, and he suddenly sensed something calling to him, murmuring within his mind. He reached out to touch it with spiritual sense, and suddenly his mind reeled, and he felt as if he had lost contact with his body. He could no longer see the mountain or the celestial land. Instead, a strange world stretched out in front of his eyes. It was boundless, filled with curling mists. A 6-colored glow was everywhere, missing violet. It pierced through, shining. Meng Hao looked mutely. He couldn't feel his body, yet was there. Concentrating, he realized he could move. Only his will was here. The world sped past as he shot through the mists. Occasional beams of bright light shot past him. It seemed like this place had no end. Everything was a blur. Inside the celestial land, beneath the mountain next to the pill furnace, Meng Hao sat there cross-legged. His expression seemed to be constantly changing, as if he were lost in a dream. All of the others around him looked exactly the same. Their expressions seemed to flicker with surprise, confusion, and thoughtfulness. Meanwhile, outside of the Violet Fate Celestial Land, atop Eastern Emergence Mountain, 10 glowing, richly colored screens suddenly blossomed up out of the pill furnace. Images gradually became clear on the screens, depicting each of the people within the trial by fire. As they sat there cross-legged, their expressions were clearly visible to all of the alchemists of the East Pill division who sat on the mountaintop, as well as the representatives from the other sects and clans who had come to observe the proceedings. Each and every action of the 10 within the celestial land was clearly visible to everyone. The mountaintop was peaceful, and everyone seemed to be dividing their attention between the 10 various screens. Lin Hailong looked at them and murmured to himself, "Every Violet Furnace Lord trial by fire requires the candidates to proceed through 4 regions and face 4 tests. However, before facing the tests, they must acquire their personal life furnaces. The life furnace is the key. The type of furnace acquired will depend completely on the good fortune of the alchemist." Meng Hao lost track of time as he proceeded on through the endless emptiness. All he could see was mist and the 6-colored glow. There was nothing else. After a very long time had passed, Meng Hao was starting to feel tired. Suddenly, a violet glow flickered up ahead of him. Meng Hao peered forward. His attention was seized by this violet glow that suddenly appeared in a world which lacked violet. The violet glow didn't move but just sat there flickering. Suddenly, a pill furnace became visible within the glow, about the size of an infant's fist. Magical symbols circulated around the pill furnace, which emanated a violet light. Just as Meng Hao's will moved forward to touch the pill furnace, it suddenly shot backward, streaming magical symbols. Before Meng Hao could get any closer, it sped off into the distance. Meng Hao muttered to himself for a moment, then proceeded forward. Not much time passed before he caught sight of another violet glow, within which was another pill furnace. It looked a bit different than the other one as it had 3 legs. However, as Meng Hao approached, it too disappeared off into the distance. So, Meng Hao thought to himself, "I have to select a furnace, and the furnace has to select me." He decided to stop moving, and instead calmed himself and settled his will. "I'll use my Tao of alchemy to communicate with this world created by the mother of furnaces. I will search the emptiness for the life furnace that is fated to belong to me." With that, he figuratively closed his eyes. Time passed, a very, very long time. Meng Hao gradually grew calmer. Soon, within his mind, he saw 9 spheres of will. These 9 spheres were the other candidates within the trial by fire. He could sense them, and they in turn could sense him. It was a strange feeling. They couldn't see each other, but they could feel each other. Meng Hao and the other 9 relied on their Tao of alchemy to sense this world, and to attempt to draw out their own personal life furnace. Gradually, beams of glowing light appeared around the other 9 people. Chu Yuyan had attracted 7 or 8 pill furnaces of various colors. As for Yi Feimu, he had dozens spinning around him. All of them seemed to desire to be selected by him. The other people had 2 or 3 at the minimum. Meng Hao alone had only 1 pill furnace. His heart sank before he calmed himself. "In my Tao of alchemy," he thought, "my body is the pill furnace and my heart is the pill formula. Few people can conform to this philosophy, therefore, it is difficult for me to attract a suitable life furnace." He began to murmur, sending his will out in all directions. "Pill furnaces, if you follow me, you will reach the pinnacle. Come with me and become eternal." Suddenly, an almost countless number of glowing lights appeared throughout the nothingness of the world. More than 10,000 of them flickered in all corners of the world. The pill furnaces trembled, as if they were reacting to Meng Hao's voice. "In my Tao of alchemy, my body is the furnace and my heart is the formula. I will refine all the myriads of things in nature. I will refine the transformations of the sun and moon. Such a refining requires a furnace, my life furnace. Follow me for a life of transformation." His will surged out, growing stronger, increasing the number of pill furnaces that reacted to him to over 100,000. Half among them began to quiver violently, seemingly excited, and yet hesitating. "I vow that whichever pill furnace follows me will never be destroyed. It will never shatter." His will echoed out, growing even stronger. Among the 50,000 trembling pill furnaces, 10,000 of them began to emit droning noises. "I vow that whichever pill furnace follows me will concoct medicinal pills of the stars, and will give birth to pill spirit. This is my personal vow." His will soared, and in that instant within the 10,000 pill furnaces, 1,000 began to drone even louder and emit even brighter glittering auras. "I vow that whichever pill furnace belongs to me, when I achieve my Tao, it will incarnate a body." His will thundered out. Among the 1,000 pill furnaces was a violet furnace which suddenly shot out of nowhere, heading directly toward Meng Hao. Meng Hao's formless eyes opened, and before him appeared a 9-legged violet furnace. It shone with a flickering, violet glow as it floated in the air in front of him. Magical symbols emanated off of it. It was obvious from a mere glance that it was completely beyond ordinary. This is my life furnace, selected from within the void. Meng Hao's eyes shone brightly as he slowly lifted his hand to take hold of it. At that exact moment, a powerful screaming noise shook the entire world. The pill furnace in front of Meng Hao began to tremble, as did all the pill furnaces hovering around the other 9 candidates. They all seemed terrified. Something violent and shocking was about to happen. This chapter was sponsored by Robert Kunze. Chapter 281, Rather Die Than Submit. A black beam of light appeared, streaking toward them from off in the distance. It shot toward Chu Yuyan's will at nearly impossible speed, slamming into some of the pill furnaces which were circling around her. The instant it hit them, they shattered into pieces, which the black beam devoured. It was with great difficulty that Chu Yuyan had attracted these pill furnaces out of the group of 100,000 others. Just as she had found one she had synergy with, the black beam slammed into it and destroyed it. It seemed the furnaces didn't dare to flee, as if the black beam were an emperor demanding the death of a subordinate. Chu Yuyan's will was instantly shaken. Not all of the pill furnaces were shattered. There were 2 or 3 that the black beam seemed to disregard. An instant later, the black beam shot toward Yi Feimu. It circled around him and the dozens of pill furnaces which he had attracted. Half of them shattered to pieces and were consumed. The beam then moved on to the others. The black beam moved in the twinkling of an eye. Next, it shot toward Meng Hao. He had no time to snatch the pill furnace which hovered in front of him. The black beam slammed into his violet pill furnace, and it disintegrated and was sucked up by the beam. Rage instantly billowed up from the depths of Meng Hao's heart. His fury soared to the heavens. He was not like the other candidates who had been able to attract multiple pill furnaces from out of the 100,000. To them, losing a few was not a huge matter. They could always select another one that the beam didn't destroy. However, Meng Hao had expended a lot of effort to persuade the violet pill furnace to accept him. Then, it was destroyed in the blink of an eye by the black beam. Now he was left without anything at all. How could he not fly into a rage? After destroying Meng Hao's pill furnace, the black beam exuded a will of arrogance and shot off into the distance. It seemed an emperor surveying his territory, killing a few officials before moving on. Meng Hao could clearly make out the image of a pill furnace within the black beam. It was completely black and emanated no magical symbols whatsoever. Black was not one of the colors within this world, making it seem completely incompatible, as if it were above all the other pill furnaces. Destroy my pill furnace, will you? Fine, my new pill furnace is going to be you. His fury billowing up, his will suddenly shot into pursuit of the black pill furnace. At this moment, Meng Hao cast aside the so-called follow your heart theory and the idea of finding the life furnace that belonged to him alone. This was his personality. If you destroy Meng Hao's pill furnace, then regardless of the reason you did so, you will pay the price to replace it. This is Meng Hao. His fury rippled and his will shot out in pursuit of the black beam. To add insult to injury, the black pill furnace didn't seem to even notice him. Its level of arrogance was incredible. As it moved, it viciously smashed into other pill furnaces, destroying and consuming them. It seemed that this pill furnace had its own spirit, which viewed Meng Hao with contempt. Meanwhile, just outside of Violet East Mountain, everyone sat around the mother of furnaces. Chu Yuyan opened her eyes. Slowly, so did Yi Feimu and the other 7. As they did, the air above their hands began to glow, and then transformed into pill furnaces. It didn't matter the color of the pill furnace they had acquired within the illusory world. The pill furnaces that appeared in their hands now were white, each and every one of them. Everyone had awakened except for Meng Hao. He still sat there, eyes closed in meditation, his brow furrowed and his jaw clenched. Outside the celestial land, everyone, including the violet furnace lords, had no way to see what was happening within the mother of furnaces. The only thing they could see were the expressions on the faces of Meng Hao and the others. Now, everyone was focused on Meng Hao and his lack of success. Chu Yuyan also glanced at him. Not saying a word, she stood and raced toward Violet East Mountain, pill furnace in hand. Yi Feimu's body flashed as he also charged forward, head toward the first of the paths that led up the mountain. The other 7 candidates also silently headed toward Violet East Mountain, each picking a path of their own. As they did, the paths disappeared behind them. Soon, there was only one path left on the mountain, left behind for Meng Hao, who was still in meditation. Within the illusory world of the furnace, Meng Hao was engaged in mad pursuit of the black beam. It had led him to every corner of the place, and as it did, its contemptuous will seemed to grow stronger and stronger. Finally, Meng Hao lost his patience and gave a cold snort. Demon Sealing, 8th Hex. This world was under some type of sealing, making it impossible for outsiders to see inside. He held nothing back. His invisible body dissipated, and a part of Meng Hao's soul appeared amidst endless ripples. The ripples transformed into gossamer strands which shot toward the black pill furnace, entangling it. The black pill furnace seemed frozen in shock. In its memory, it had never encountered anyone who could catch it. Within this world, it was the sovereign. No one could possibly lay hold of it. And yet, today it had run into a magical technique capable of shaking both its will and its pill furnace form. It stopped. It took the space of 2 breaths to shake itself free. However, just as it was about to speed off, an illusory hand appeared and clamped down onto it. Originally, Meng Hao's presence had been invisible. However, because of the 8th demon sealing hex, an illusory image of his body could now be seen. "Where do you think you're running off to?" he said, locking his grip onto the pill furnace. The black pill furnace began to struggle, sending out massive waves of power. As it did, a face appeared on its surface. It was the face of an evil, vicious youth. It radiated enmity and hatred, and after it appeared, it glared at Meng Hao and let out a threatening howl. Meng Hao's eyes glittered with coldness. He lifted up his left hand and slapped the thing right across the face. The slap to the pill furnace's spirit rang out with a boom. The face was flung to the side, but then spun back around and let out another roar of rage toward Meng Hao. The roar shook the heavens with incredible might. The force of it washed over Meng Hao, shaking his will. However, he did not allow his grip to weaken in the slightest. Instead, he gave a cold harumph. "Fighting back? Well, fighting back won't do you any good." He lifted his left hand, employing the power of the 8th demon sealing hex as he pressed his finger down onto the youth's face. "You consume other pill furnaces. Fine, I don't care. But you dared to consume MY pill furnace. In doing so, you've sown karma. Now you will reap the karma and earn your reward." His left hand flickered in an incantation as he again employed the power of the 8th demon sealing hex. Streams of seals flew down onto the pill furnace. It seemed as if it would soon be sealed into complete suppression. The spirit of the pill furnace, embodied in the face of the youth, struggled with fierce intensity. Its will of hatred grew more powerful than ever. In a frenzy, it opened its mouth and let loose a piercing scream. The sound filled the entire illusory world. All of the pill furnaces inside heard it and began to tremble. They immediately began to rush toward Meng Hao. In the blink of an eye, Meng Hao was surrounded by stream after stream of glowing lights. 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000. More than 100,000 beams of light circulated around Meng Hao. The glow they caused rose up endlessly and gradually transformed into 100,000 pill furnaces. They had Meng Hao completely surrounded. The buzzing noise they emitted echoed out as they spun around him at top speed. It seemed they had Meng Hao in their crosshairs. If he didn't release the black pill furnace, they would attack him. The black pill furnace youth ceased its attempts to flee. A proud look appeared on its face, then aggressive arrogance. It looked at Meng Hao as if it were attempting to provoke him. However, it was at this moment that Meng Hao lifted his hand and once again slapped the face. Rage covered the face of the black pill furnace youth. A scream rang out, causing the surrounding 100,000 pill furnaces to suddenly charge and attack. They shot toward Meng Hao, sending out ripples throughout the air. Their glow lifted up to the heavens. Meng Hao merely gave a cold snort and closed his eyes. Time to leave. His will sprang into action, immediately beginning to disappear, along with the furnace he gripped. Its shrill cry slowly dissipated as the 100,000 pill furnaces charged in attack. Not a single one of them was able to touch Meng Hao. Outside of the pill furnace in the celestial land, Meng Hao sat cross-legged in meditation. Suddenly, his eyes flashed open. The instant they did, a black glow shot up in front of him and a pill furnace appeared. Despite the fact that it was here, it appeared to be struggling. But Meng Hao's will was still in his body. How could he possibly allow it to flee? He gripped it hard, and his eyes glowed with a fierce cold aura. "Are you really looking to die?" The pill furnace continued to struggle, and as it did, a strand of will entered Meng Hao's mind. It said, it would rather die than submit. Meng Hao smiled, a smile filled with coldness. "Rather die than submit. No, I'm not going to destroy you. Starting today, I don't care if you want to or not, you're my pill furnace, no matter how much you resist." He stood up and looked toward Violet East Mountain and the only remaining path leading up it. At the same time, outside of the Celestial Land, on Eastern Emergence Mountain, the onlookers didn't seem to be very impressed. However, the 8 Violet Furnace Lords' faces all flickered. That black pill furnace contains its own will. I saw that same furnace when I was in there all those years ago. I wanted to take it, but failed. This Fang Mu seems to have created some kind of connection with it. It's extremely rare to see that pill furnace within the illusory world. The will of a cultivator is no match for it, and should be incapable of capturing it. After all these years, it has become the sovereign pill furnace of the illusory world. Just what promises did Fang Mu make to the black pill furnace to get it to accept him? From the expression on his face, it seems that maybe the two of them are having some conflicts. As the Violet Furnace Lords discussed the scene, the other onlookers also began to notice Meng Hao and the pill furnace. That's strange. Why does Fang Mu have a black pill furnace? Everyone else got white ones. As people expressed their surprise, Grandmaster Pill Demon's eyes began to glitter with a strange light. This kid actually managed to bring it out. An imperceptible smile touched the corners of his mouth. Back in the world of the Celestial Land, the pill furnace beneath Violet East Mountain began to tremble. A roaring sound filled the air, along with a 7-colored glow. It seemed almost like the 100,000 pill furnaces within were in a frenzy, trying to break their way out from within. This chapter was sponsored by Kyle Greenwood. Chapter 282, The First Region. Everyone on the outside stared in shock. Many of the East Pill Division alchemists were filled with disbelief. The furnace within the Celestial Land emitted thunderous booms. The roaring was so intense that the massive furnace rocked back and forth. Quite a distance away, Meng Hao suddenly looked back. No one in the outside world would know why the furnace was doing this, but he did. The 100,000 pill furnaces inside were attempting to bash their way out to pursue him. His eyes glittering, he shot away from the pill furnace, reaching the final path available to tread on Violet East Mountain. He was exhausted, but he still propelled himself forward with full power. In the space of a few breaths, he was on the path, climbing upward. The mountain path disappeared behind him. The pill furnace's booming grew even more intense, and popping sounds rang out. Meng Hao wasn't worried. Not even looking back, he continued up the mountain path. Everyone in the outside world could see the pill furnace rocking violently back and forth. It seemed as if it would explode into pieces at any moment. "Crafty move, kid," said Pill Demon with an enigmatic smile. He reached his hand out toward the image of the Celestial Land and extended a finger. When his finger descended, a roar filled the sky of the Celestial Land, where magically appeared the massive image of a finger. The finger seemed to fill the entire sky and cover the entire land, becoming a canopy covering the whole Celestial Land. The finger was incredibly thick and coarse. The fingerprint was clearly visible on its surface. The appearance of this immense finger seemed to shake the Celestial Land like the will of the heavens itself. The sub-patriarchs from the outside sects were also astonished. They watched the screen mutely as the scene unfolded within the Celestial Land. The power it emitted shook the heaven and rocked the earth, as if it had governance over both. Endless, infinite ripples emanated out, as if the finger had a will of its own. It slowly pressed down on the furnace at the foot of Violet East Mountain. The instant it pressed down, the entire world of the Celestial Land shook. After that, everything was still. The previously rocking and trembling pill furnace was now incapable of any movement whatsoever as the finger pressed down on it. All of this lasted for the space of about 2 breaths. Then, the enormous finger disappeared, and the pill furnace was once again calm. On Eastern Emergence Mountain, everything was quiet. Patriarch Violet Civ was panting as his heart raced. He looked over in shock at the expressionless Grandmaster Pill Demon. According to the rumors, he thought, the most powerful expert in the Violet Fate sect is not a patriarch of the Violet Chi division, but Grandmaster Pill Demon himself. The rumors also say that Grandmaster Pill Demon's cultivation base reached the spirit-severing stage years ago. If it hadn't, how could he have lived more than 1,000 years? The sub-patriarchs from the other sects all seemed to be thinking the same thing. The second Sword Lord of the Solitary Sword sect lowered his head slightly. He was one of the few people present who knew how frightening Grandmaster Pill Demon's cultivation base actually was. Because Pill Demon didn't want to make a big deal about it, he'd only invited these sub-patriarchs to the apprentice-accepting ceremony. Otherwise, he would have invited the true patriarchs of the great sects and clans. Su Luo from the Blood Demon sect was panting slowly, and his eyes glowed with a blood-colored shine that quickly turned into reverence. He thought silently about how much the Blood Demon sect feared Grandmaster Pill Demon. They had compiled many of the rumors regarding Grandmaster Pill Demon and had uncovered a shocking secret. Unfortunately, such a secret would never be known to very many people. Jade of the Black Civ sect looked on with narrowed eyes. A cold will gleamed in his eyes, mixed with an unprecedented sense of concentration. Seems familiar, like an old friend's aura. His eyes flickered as he looked at Pill Demon. As the outsiders were shocked by Grandmaster Pill Demon's actions, Meng Hao was walking up the steps of the path on Violet East Mountain. Occasionally he would look ahead, but all he could see was mist. The peak was not visible. Time passed slowly. Meng Hao trudged up the steps, apprehension growing at how tall this mountain was. 5 days had passed. He had long since lost sight of the land below. Clouds and fog surrounded him completely. However high he was, Meng Hao got the feeling that when compared to the peak, he was still at the base. The higher he went, the thinner the air got. There was nothing that could put pressure onto his cultivation base, but each step became harder. Soon it took twice as much effort as when he started. Meng Hao had started out at a dead rush, already exhausted. Add in the effort spent struggling with the black pill furnace and he could no longer race ahead. Now he went one slow step at a time. Every once in a while he would pause and look around. The surroundings were lush and verdant. Grass grew all around, which Meng Hao would occasionally pick. From the perspective of the outside observers, Meng Hao had already fallen far behind. All the other candidates were much further ahead of him. This was especially true of Yi Feimu, who was the first alchemist to enter the first of the 4 regions. Just up ahead of him was an enormous stone boulder which was covered with dense inscriptions. After examining it for some time, Yi Feimu sat down next to it cross-legged. After that, he pulled out a pill furnace and began to concoct a pill. The next day, the pill emerged. Holding it carefully with both hands, he proceeded past the boulder. Not long after, Chu Yuyan also concocted a pill and then proceeded forward. All of the other alchemists except for Meng Hao did the same. The master alchemists of the East Pill Division began to discuss what was happening. No wonder Yi Feimu is at the peak of the Furnace Lord rank. His cultivation base is extraordinary, and he was the first person to step into the first region. His ability to recognize medicinal pills as well as his pill concocting skill are both anything but sloppy. I bet he's going to win. Chu Yuyan is also doing well. This promotion trial by fire is most likely going to come down to a decision between the two of them. Earlier, I thought Fang Mu might have had a chance, but I never thought he would spend so much time getting a pill furnace. What a pity. Right, if your first step is slow, then all of them will be slow. Most of the sound of discussion came from the ordinary master alchemists. The Furnace Lords and Violet Furnace Lords just watched on thoughtfully, opting to say nothing. A few days later, Meng Hao finally reached the first region and saw the enormous boulder. He looked at the inscriptions, studying them for a while, before glancing at the path which proceeded on upward. This is the first region. After this boulder, the path to the second region is covered with a poisonous miasma. One must concoct a poison-repelling pill to be able to get through safely. The greatest difficulty is that throughout the journey, different miasmas will appear, and special pills will have to be concocted for each one. Meng Hao thought about the situation for a moment. Finally, he pulled out the black pill furnace and looked it over. It seemed to him that he hadn't truly won out over it, so he decided to put it back into his bag of holding, leaving it suppressed for the time being. Instead, he took out the 10,000 refinements furnace, put some medicinal plants in it, and then started concocting. After 2 hours he had produced a medicinal pill. He swallowed it, then glanced around at the scenery once more, and then walked past the enormous rock. As he proceeded onward, his body was enveloped by a thin mist. The master alchemists immediately began to discuss what had just happened. Furnace Lord Fang Mu thinks too much of himself. He only used 2 hours. Of all the other candidates, the one who used the least time was Yi Feimu, who took 4 hours. The longest was a day. How could he possibly compare with Furnace Lord Yi? Furnace Lord Yi is Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. Look, he's the furthest ahead and is already halfway through the first region. Everyone watching the screens could clearly see what was happening, and knew exactly how far everyone had progressed. Even some of the Furnace Lords exchanged glances. To them, it really did look like Meng Hao was being sloppy and careless. Of course, Meng Hao had no idea what things they were saying, nor did he care to know. He continued on relentlessly through the miasma. It grew thicker as he went, and the color changed as well to dark gray. All the plants and flowers in the area were withered, and seemingly had been for years. A gloomy, cold aura filled the air. As Meng Hao went on, he occasionally caught sight of arm-length centipedes, scurrying about quickly through the shriveled grass. However, whatever poisonous bugs appeared as Meng Hao walked along would suddenly pause, seemingly incapable of touching him. They would just let him pass. Time passed slowly. As he traveled, he would occasionally stop, using nearby withered grass and poisonous bugs to concoct a pill. He did this 3 times. More poisonous bugs began to appear, soon swarming, but as soon as Meng Hao neared, they would tremble or run away. As for the miasma, it consistently moved out of his way. This too was clearly visible to the observers, who watched on with wide-eyed astonishment. Soon, more and more eyes were focusing on Meng Hao's screen. It wasn't just the East Pill division, even cultivators from the other sects were watching closely. He's using the poison bugs to make medicinal pills, but what pill exactly? What medicinal pill is that? It has such an incredible effect. The cultivators watched in astonishment, then glanced at the screens of the other candidates, including Yi Feimu and Chu Yuyan. Most were reaching the end of the first region stairs. Most had concocted pills many times during the journey to ward off poison, but none were as dramatically effective as Meng Hao's. This, of course, was because the poison bugs along the path didn't seem to have any inclination of avoiding Yi Feimu and the others. However, in their terror, they clambered over each other in order to get out of Meng Hao's way. If this scene was taking place anywhere except the Violet Fate Sect trial by fire, then plenty of people would begin to make connections. But this was a Violet Furnace Lord promotion, so there ended up being only one conclusion drawn by the observers. The pills Fang Mu concocted were anything but ordinary. Chapter 283, Goofing Off. Actually, even if Meng Hao hadn't concocted pills, the miasma wouldn't have been harmful to him. The resurrection lily had been suppressed, but its nature talent was still within him, which could innately dispel all poisons. Meng Hao did not fear poison. Granted, many years had passed since the Blood Immortal Legacy Tournament, which so many cultivators had witnessed one. The Blood Immortal Legacy Tournament was quite a long story arc. He passed the poison matrix in Chapter 125. However, anyone observing could easily make a connection. Thus, he had concocted the pills to make it seem like they were repelling the poisons. However, their true function was to suppress his own aura, which was affecting the poison bugs and the miasma. That, of course, was something about him that was completely different from the other candidates. There was really no choice but to suppress his aura in this way. If he didn't do so with the medicinal pills, then, as he traveled through the miasma, it would explode away from him immediately, and the entire area would be completely free of it, without the slightest trace. Even having suppressed his aura, the miasma still spread out away from him. There was literally nothing he could do to make himself walk through the miasma and have it remain still. As for the poisonous bugs, were it not for the fact that his aura had been suppressed, they simply wouldn't dare to exist nearby. In fact, Meng Hao was worried that he might lose control of his suppressed aura, and that any bugs which hadn't fled far enough away from him would spontaneously die. If that happened, it would definitely attract attention from the outside world. Therefore, the best he could do was use medicinal pills to suppress his aura, be extremely cautious not to allow the miasma to completely disperse, and try to make the poison bugs behave a bit more normally. Despite all of that, he caused quite a stir on the outside world. However, it was just a stir, not enough to draw any connections to the Blood Immortal Legacy Tournament. Several days later, the first person made it to the second region, and of course, it was Yi Feimu. Behind him was Chu Yuyan, and then in third place Meng Hao, the newcomer to the top of the group. As far as the other 7 people, 2 more eventually appeared at the boulder marking the second region. The other 5 were still stuck back on the path in the miasma, concocting pills and slowly moving forward. When the candidates arrived at the large boulder, all of them discovered the same thing. Strands of violet chi emerged and latched onto their pill furnaces and then merged into them, causing them to change color. The same thing happened to the Meng Hao. The black pill furnace seemed very opposed to this happening, but considering how it was suppressed by Meng Hao, there was nothing it could do to resist. People outside immediately began to discuss what was happening. They have only just passed the first region, and you can already see the difference. It looks like the final candidate will be one of these 5 people. However, I still think Furnace Lord Yi has the advantage. Suddenly, Violet Furnace Lord Nzehai's voice rang out. The Violet Furnace Lord Trial by Fire promotion tests an alchemist's skill in the Tao of Alchemy. Falling behind means nothing. The year I took the test, I came in last in the first 2 regions. However, I successfully passed the 3rd region. You should spend your time observing how these 10 chosen alchemists concoct pills. And Zehai's voice immediately silenced the surrounding alchemists. They grew silent and watched thoughtfully. What they saw was that the 5 alchemists in last place were all very calm. All of them were concocting pills in different ways, and not one of them experienced the slightest failure. Time passed slowly. Meng Hao had already been staring thoughtfully for several hours at the boulder leading into the 2nd region. It wasn't just him. On their various respective paths, Yifeimu and Chu Yuyan were also staring with furrowed brows at the boulders. The boulders completely blocked the various paths. Only by fulfilling the requirements laid out would a fissure open in the boulder and allow passage through. Meng Hao murmured to himself as he sat cross-legged next to the boulder. Concoct pills for the 4 great stages: Qi condensation, foundation establishment, core formation, and nascent soul. Each must have 80% medicinal strength or higher and must contain variations from the 10 million plant types. Creating a unique pill counts as perfection. A thoughtful look appeared in his eyes. The 4 regions of the trial tested an alchemist's skill in the Tao of Alchemy. The first region tested the skill of concocting pills based on circumstances. Different situations required different pills, requiring flexibility. It seemed simple, but in reality, most furnace lords were incapable of it. The second region was even more difficult. It tested fundamental pill concocting ability. 4 pills, 1 for each of the 4 great stages. Medicinal strength must be maintained, and mastery of the 10 million plant variations was necessary. This trial was comprehensive, and the second region could not be passed by anyone not at the peak of the Furnace Lord rank. Even for those qualified, passing was not easy. Meng Hao sat there thinking silently for some time, as did Chu Yuyan, Yifeimu, along with the other candidates who made it to the second region boulder. There were no requirements regarding medicinal plants. Each alchemist could do as he pleased. Based on one's mastery of plant variations, one could depict a medicinal plant on the boulder's surface, and the celestial land would produce an illusory replication for pill concoction. They were illusory, but very realistic. There are 2 options, thought Chu Yuyan. One is the easy path to concoct an existing pill. After all, the only requirements are those regarding medicinal strength and skill with the 10 million variations of plants and vegetation. The other path is much harder, to create a new medicinal pill to make something out of nothing. Both paths can lead to the pinnacle. However, the road of a Violet Furnace Lord lies along the second path. Determination filled her eyes. She was an apprentice of Grandmaster Pill Demon, so she had to prove herself. Yifeimu obviously felt the same way. He stared at the boulder, and as he did, a bright light shone in his eyes along with a proud, unyielding look. If I'm going to concoct something, he thought, I will concoct a pill no other person has ever seen, a pill which contains my very self. I will show that I have the will of a Violet Furnace Lord. At almost the same time, resolve showed on the faces of Chu Yuyan and Yifeimu as they chose the second of the 2 paths. As for the others, most picked the easy path, although some attempted to concoct original creations. Each one made their decision based on their own Tao of Alchemy. Meng Hao looked at the boulder thoughtfully, sighing as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. He had traveled 4 days non-stop, battled the black pill furnace, and was now exhausted. He looked at the requirements and realized that creating a new pill would exhaust him further. He began to murmur, concocting an existing pill is better than creating something new. Creating a new pill requires good fortune, alchemic enlightenment, and meticulous concentration, otherwise the quality suffers. This is the best decision. His mind at ease, he began to concoct. He lifted his right hand and pressed down onto the boulder. It rippled like water. The medicinal plants in his mind slowly began to appear. A medicinal pill for the Qi condensation stage. I'll make the simplest one, a Qi condensation pill. He flicked his sleeve, and an illusory pill furnace emerged from the boulder, into which he fed bunch after bunch of medicinal plants. After another moment's thought, he began to concoct. Not too much time passed before Chu Yuyan's eyes opened, and she waved her beautiful hand. A pill furnace appeared and her eyes glittered brightly as she began to concoct. After enough time passed for an incense stick to burn, Yifeimu opened his eyes. Filled with self-confidence, he began to concoct. The observers outside on Eastern Emergence Mountain were watching intently as everything happened. Their eyes passed back and forth among the 10 screens, including Meng Hao, the the 10th person. Of course, the focus was Yi Feimu and Chu Yuyan, who had performed spectacularly in the first region. And of course, many were paying attention to Meng Hao, who had attracted such attention with his own performance there. However, Meng Hao was taking the easy path to pill cultivation. Currently, he was concocting a qi condensation pill. He wasn't the only one. In total, 7 were doing so. The audience could see the instructions on the boulder, and thus began discussing things in low tones. It was relatively easy to determine what this part of the test was about. It turns out Fang Mu is concocting a qi condensation pill. It seems like he's falling further and further behind Chu Yuyan and Yi Feimu in this second region. I heard about Furnace Lord Yi Feimu a long time ago. His skill in the Tao of alchemy is at the pinnacle. Based on the look of it, he's not just concocting some ordinarily medicinal pill. Could he be working on an original creation? Lin Heilong gave a slight smile as he turned to Nzehai and said, Chu Yuyan is most likely also creating an original medicinal pill. Simply having the confidence to do that is worthy of praise. Nzehai gave a slight nod. His expression was calm as he glanced at the 10 screens. When he saw Meng Hao and took note of what he was concocting, he felt slightly amused. In his opinion, Meng Hao understood that an original creation would allow him to pass this critical juncture, but had decided instead to save time and effort. Time passed, and in the blink of an eye, 3 days had gone by. Meng Hao had produced a qi condensation pill of 80% medicinal strength, as well as a foundation establishment day of similar quality. Now he was working on a pill for the core formation stage, a spiritualization pill. Before, Meng Hao would have had a difficult time concocting such a pill, considering his cultivation base. However, now that he had 10 Tao pillars and was of the great circle of foundation establishment, concocting a simple, common spiritualization pill required a bit of effort but wasn't very difficult. In fact, he was both concocting and resting at the same time. Having been in Violet East Mountain for several days now, he had now recovered quite a bit of energy. He was no longer exhausted, and his pill concocting went a bit faster than before. However, the moment his spiritualization pill emerged was also the exact moment when Chu Yuyan's original qi condensation stage medicinal pill came out. When it did, brilliant light swirled up from her pill. At a single glance, it was obvious this was no ordinary pill. It immediately attracted quite a bit of notice on the outside world. At the same time, Yi Feimu's original medicinal pill emerged. A 4-colored glow enveloped it, a bit brighter than the glow from Chu Yuyan's pill. A sudden gasp of astonishment could be heard from the spectators. As for Meng Hao, however, he produced nothing extraordinary whatsoever. Like most of the others, he had chosen to concoct familiar pills. Furthermore, from his attitude, it seemed as if he were goofing off. It was completely different from the conscientiousness of Chu Yuyan and Yi Feimu. In fact, the clear-cut difference between them made Meng Hao seem even more unremarkable. Only one person on Eastern Emergence Mountain was different, Grandmaster Pill Demon. When he casually glanced at the screen depicting Meng Hao, an imperceptible shadow of a smile appeared on his face. This chapter was sponsored by Lucas Arnold, Nightrunners, Valera McDaniel, David Botlander, and Mitchell Dowling. Chapter 284, 3 People, 3 Taos of Alchemy. By the time Chu Yuyan and Yi Feimu were in the midst of creating their foundation establishment stage medicinal pill, Meng Hao had already finished with the spiritualization pill and had begun to work on the nascent soul medicinal pill. Medicinal pills for increasing the cultivation base during the nascent soul stage were made from rare medicinal plants. There were not many in the southern domain. For 4 or 5 people from a single sect to possess one would be considered incredible. These were not pills that could be mass-produced. One batch might make 3 or perhaps 5. Therefore, they were quite prized. Such pills were not common even in the Violet Fate sect. When you consider that a nascent soul cultivator who practices breathing exercises can absorb all of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth within a 3-kilometer radius in a single breath, it is easy to imagine how important medicinal pills can be to them. If they possess such pills, all is well. If they don't, the only remaining option is to take them by force. However, the most difficult and valuable medicinal pills for nascent soul cultivators are those which extend longevity. The value of such pills is extremely high. A lifespan that does not exceed 1,000 years is not a defiance of the heavens. The only way to live past 1,000 years and defy the heavens is to sever the spirit. Otherwise, one can only waste away in death. Of all medicinal pills for the nascent soul stage, The most basic are healing pills, and the easiest to concoct. Generally, they are of average effectiveness. However, they must be considered nascent soul stage. Meng Hao decided to concoct just such a simple pill. As far as he was concerned, this wasn't finagling, but rather using the simplest method to pass this test. He didn't want to expend mental energy creating a unique pill. Therefore, several days later, one of the most common healing pills for the nascent soul stage emerged. Meng Hao held the 4 pills and pushed them into the boulder. The boulder trembled, then a fissure appeared down the middle, a little over half a foot wide. It almost seemed the boulder wasn't pleased with Meng Hao's pills. However, he had met the requirements. Each pill contained 5 of the 10 million plant variations, although most had been obscured by a technique. He looked at the fissure and cleared his throat. He knew he was being observed. With a bashful expression, he lowered his head and walked up to the crack. By turning his body and exerting effort, he squeezed himself through. Then, with a solemn expression and no awkwardness, he continued along the steps toward the 3rd region. The master alchemists of the East Pill Division made bitter smiles. Those familiar with Fang Mu seemed embarrassed. Using such a method was an eyesore. This was especially clear after looking at the earnestness with which Chu Yuyan and Yi Feimu worked. Meng Hao's attitude aroused the scorn of those who disliked him. A few of the 8 Violet Furnace Lords also frowned. However, Meng Hao was the first to pass the 2nd region. Hands clasped behind his back, he casually walked into the 3rd region, looking as if he were just taking a stroll. One of the Violet Furnace Lords, a middle-aged man named Yi Yunshan, said, "Fang Mu doesn't seem to be taking things seriously. With such subpar character, he's clearly not suitable to become a Violet Furnace Lord." His voice was cool and carried authority. And Zehai laughed and said, "Not necessarily. There's no rule against using the simplest method to charge past." "That's true, elder brethren," replied Yi Yunshan with a smile. "Now, though, I'm very curious to see what sort of decision he will make in the 3rd region." Moments later, more candidates emerged from the 2nd region. Only Chu Yuyan and Yi Feimu remained. 5 people came out total. The other 2 were unable to complete pills with 80% medicinal strength and thus forfeited. Now, only 8 screens remained of the original 10, above the pill furnace in the outside world. When Meng Hao reached the boulder marking the 3rd region, violet qi poured out. It was only a tiny thread, and lasted only for the space of about 3 breaths. He had succeeded, but the approval of the celestial land was not great. After the strand of violet qi entered the pill furnace, Meng Hao looked at the boulder, then sat down cross-legged in front of it. He took a moment to erase the last bit of exhaustion in him, until he was filled with energy. Chu Yuyan's final pill emerged, and when it did, her face was pale. It had been extremely difficult for her to concoct the 4th pill. As for original creations, she had persisted up until the Foundation Establishment pill. As for the Core Formation and Nascent Soul pills, she was unable to create new versions of such pills. Instead, she had selected the most difficult of the pill formulas she knew to concoct the final 2 pills. Wiping the sweat from her brow, she watched as a 3-meter-wide fissure split apart the boulder in front of her. A self-confident smile on her face, she strode forward. After her, Yi Feimu finished his pill concoction. Similar to Chu Yuyan, he had been unable to make original creations for all 4 pill varieties. He had succeeded in making an original pill for the Core Formation stage, but as for the Nascent Soul stage, he could not proceed. Having no other choice, he created the most high-level and difficult pill for the Nascent Soul stage that he could think of. It took 10 attempts before he finally succeeded. Everything happened relatively quickly, because everything moved more quickly within the world of the celestial land. Were it outside, it would take over a year to concoct the 4 pills he had. Yi Feimu took in a deep breath as he watched a 6-meter-wide fissure cracked open the boulder in front of him. A proud look filled his eyes as he strode through. It was becoming readily apparent to the observers which of the various candidates were above the others. A buzz of discussion echoed out as they began to talk about the shocking sight of the fissure created by Yi Feimu. As Chu Yuyan and the others reached the boulder marking the 3rd region, dense violet qi poured out toward them. The violet qi which emerged for Chu Yuyan lasted for the time it takes an incense stick to burn before dissipating. Most shockingly was Yi Feimu. His lasted for the time it takes 2 incense sticks to burn. Furthermore, his pill furnace had already turned light violet. On their various respective paths, the other candidates' pill furnaces absorbed the violet qi. Afterward, they began to concentrate on the boulder. Frowns appeared. The test for the 3rd region was even more difficult than the first 2. Meng Hao finished his meditation and opened his eyes. They glowed brightly, and his eyes glittered as he examined the text on the boulder. A thoughtful expression appeared on his face. Beyond the boulder there were no stone steps. The path ended here with only clouds visible. 9 treasures pearl curtain plants. Meng Hao's eyes narrowed as he looked at the carving. It depicted a medicinal plant with 9 flowers, each a different color. 3 treasures pearl curtain plants are common. 6 treasures are uncommon. 9 treasures are rarely seen. Each flower contains different medicinal properties. The 9 petals all work in harmony. This plant can be used in over 1,000 pill formulas. The formulas used and quality of pills concocted will determine how many steps appear. Meng Hao closed his eyes to think. On the other paths, the other candidates were facing the exact same test. Chu Yuyan reached up to place her right hand onto the boulder. Immediately, a flickering, glowing light appeared, and the 9 treasures pearl curtain plant materialized in front of her. The cultivators on the mountain peak in the outside world, including the representatives from the other sects and clans, were all paying very close attention to the incredible scene which was taking place within the trial by fire. Violet Furnace Lord Yi Yunchen coolly opened his mouth and said, "The third region tests both pill concocting and decision-making. How many pills must be concocted to magically create a perfect set of stairs? That is the key." From start to finish, his gaze never left Yi Feimu's screen. His words caused the faces of many of the master alchemists to fill with astonishment. One by one, they began to focus intently on the various screens. Chu Yuyan looked at the plant floating in front of her. A thoughtful look glittered in her phoenix-like eyes. The Tao of alchemy is like the great Tao of cultivation, she thought. Plants and vegetation grow within heaven and earth. However, heaven and earth are not alive. Concocting pills is like refining the heavens and transforming the earth, finding a spark of life therein and turning it into a medicinal pill. Therefore, pill concoction is a search for life, a way to find that spark which doesn't exist within heaven and earth. 9 is the ultimate number. Therefore, I will make 9 pills, and each pill will contain 8 flowers. Furthermore, each pill will contain the medicinal properties of the one missing flower. These 9 pills will form a cycle that will open up the path to the heavens. Chu Yuyan's eyes glowed with determination now that she had made her decision. She immediately set to work concocting. After thinking for several hours, a serious look filled Yi Feimu's face, and he took a deep breath. His eyes narrowed as he flicked his sleeve. A 9 treasures pearl curtain plant appeared in front of him, and he began to concoct. If I'm going to concoct a pill, I'll only make one, he thought. It will contain the medicinal properties of all 9 flowers as well as that of an additional medicinal pill. I will concoct not the number 9, but the number 10. I will concoct a pill that contains a medicinal property that the 9 treasures pearl curtain plant does not. In keeping with my identity, this 10th medicinal property will be unprecedented. It was difficult to say whose thinking in regard to the Tao of alchemy was more advanced. Between the two of them, one used the Tao of alchemy to refine life to the pinnacle. The other combined all the complex variations to create something unique. At this moment, their skill in the Tao of alchemy was clearly visible to the spectators on the mountain top and caused quite a stir. Everyone, including the representatives from the outside sects, began to think deeply about the proceedings. After Chu Yuyan and Yi Feimu made their decisions, the 8 Violet Furnace Lords nodded in praise. Grandmaster Pill Demon's face, however, was unreadable, making everyone wonder which screen he was watching. It was at this moment that Meng Hao opened his eyes and they gleamed with a strange light. He lifted up his hand and pushed it onto the boulder. The 9 treasures pearl curtain plant appeared, along with his pill furnace. He did not immediately begin to concoct, though, but rather stare at the medicinal plant, his eyes shining. Within his mind flitted countless pill formulas. His skill with plants and vegetation was in full force as well. The 9 treasures pearl curtain plant rotated in his mind as he mentally began to organize the various medicinal properties and how they worked together. However, Meng Hao quickly decided to clear his mind. He looked at the medicinal plant, and then his eyes began to gleam even more brightly. He looked interested. His bearing now was vastly different than the laziness he had displayed in the second region. I'm going to concoct 10 pills, he thought. 9 minor pills and 1 master pill. 9 is the ultimate number representing strength. My body is the pill furnace and my heart is the pill formula. Refine the heavens, refine the earth, refine the changes of time. Concoct a pill that contains the essence of nature's simplicity. A look both deep and bright shone in his eyes. Were this any other place, he would not display such an attitude toward pill concocting. But within this Violet Fate sect trial by fire, his interest had been piqued. He would no longer conceal his true self. He would fully display his skill in the Tao of alchemy. Chapter 285. Who is the strongest? Meng Hao took a deep breath. Then he lifted up his right hand, took hold of a flower and put it into the pill furnace. Only the violet furnace lords could guess from Meng Hao's actions what he intended to do. However, all had different expressions, some frowning, others lost in thought. Fang Mu's choice is interesting. However, he won't be able to pull it off. Even so, that thinking in the Tao of alchemy is laudable. It contains some youth's frivolity, but considering his skill, he definitely won't succeed. I favor Yi Feimu. That kid's Tao of alchemy contains persistence, which is necessary for all of us alchemists. The violet furnace lords continued to discuss matters as they watched on. Only Sohe gaped for a moment before a bright gleam filled his eyes. He wants to concoct. His breathing grew heavier. He did not agree with the others. He turned to look at his master, Pill Demon. Grandmaster Pill Demon sat cross-legged. A strange light flickered in his eyes, then disappeared. Time passed, 3 days. Chu Yuyan had completed her first medicinal pill. When it appeared, 1,111 steps appeared up ahead of her. For over 1,000 steps to appear, caused a buzz to rise up among the crowd on the mountaintop. Moments later, Yi Feimu also produced a pill. As soon as it appeared, so did the stone stairs, 2,000 of them. This caused the observing alchemists on the mountaintop to immediately rise to their feet, looks of astonishment on their faces. What caused even more of a stir was that Yi Feimu looked at the pill with a frown, and then crushed it between his fingers. Immediately, the 2,000 stairs vanished. It seemed that 2,000 steps didn't satisfy him. In addition to Chu Yuyan, Yi Feimu, and Meng Hao, 2 others were concocting pills. All had made different choices in their concoctions, and all paled in comparison to Chu Yuyan and Yi Feimu. Each of them concocted 3 pills respectively, which produced a total of 700 stairs each. They did not dare to crush their medicinal pills, though. No matter how many pills it took, they would cause all of the stairs to appear. As for the alchemists who had fallen behind, they slowly showed up. After experiencing the difficulty of the second test, they sat there thoughtfully for a bit before beginning to concoct pills. Of course, none of them produced results as spectacular as Chu Yuyan or Yi Feimu. They took the easy route. This was not an error, however. It did not count as being part of their personal Tao of alchemy. Enough time passed for an incense stick to burn. Meng Hao was now finished with the first minor pill. It emerged, a bluish-green medicinal pill, which Meng Hao had concocted using the bluish-green flower from among the 9. The pill furnace was illusory. The 9 treasures pearl curtain plant was also illusory. Therefore, the pill that was produced was obviously not real. Despite that, it could be held in hand and it could be crushed. This was one of the bizarre, miraculous aspects of the celestial land, a magic that could create something from nothing. Meng Hao looked at the bluish-green medicinal pill in his hand, then lifted his head. Further up, the mountain path began to buzz. Suddenly, out of thin air appeared a step. A single step. Meng Hao's face was the same as ever, without the slightest hint of change. Much earlier, he had predicted that this would happen. He looked back down at the 9 treasures pearl curtain plant's crimson flower, grabbed it, and began to concoct. Seeing this caused a buzz to immediately rise up among the audience on the mountaintop. Of course, the violet furnace lords didn't participate, nor did the patriarch-level cultivators from the outside sects. They only looked on in silent thought. Based on their concentration, their age, and their experiences in life, eccentrics like this wouldn't easily show what they were thinking. However, the disciples who had accompanied them had not reached such a level. Seeing what happened instantly caused astonished exclamations and discussions to fill the air. Alchemist Fang Mu only created a single stair. That's simply too few. Is he really a furnace lord? At the very least, the other candidates created a few hundred stairs. Furnace Lord Yi created the most, 2,000, and wasn't even satisfied with that. But Fang Mu, he doesn't look even the least bit embarrassed. Maybe he has some special plan. Such discussions couldn't be avoided. Meng Hao's pill and the 1 stair it produced immediately drew division. Everyone could see what had happened and naturally began making comparisons. Hanbei frowned. She couldn't believe Fang Mu's skill in the Tao of alchemy was so limited. After her interactions with him in the Black Sieve sect, she knew of his cunning and was convinced he must be pulling off a clever trick. Zhou Jai's expression was normal, without the slightest reaction. Nothing seemed to surprise him. Fatty was secretly clenching his fists. He knew that Fang Mu was Meng Hao, which caused extreme anxiety, especially since he could not warn Meng Hao about what was happening. Li Shiki's eyes glittered slightly as she watched Fang Mu on the screen. She then glanced at Yi Feimu and frowned, as if she wasn't quite sure the meaning of everything that was happening. Of course, Meng Hao couldn't hear the commotion he had caused, nor would he heed it. He was thoroughly engrossed in concocting his second pill. His bearing was completely different from the second region. However, the more earnestly he worked, the more derision rose from the outsiders. A day later, Chu Yuyan finished her second medicinal pill. Just the same as before, 1,111 stairs appeared. Yi Feimu's second pill also was completed. When it appeared, a great roaring shook the heavens and rocked the earth. 4,000 stairs. He's no Furnace Lord. This Violet Furnace Lord promotion definitely belongs to him. Violet Furnace Lord Yi Yunshin chuckled. He looked at Yi Feimu with deep praise. The other Violet Furnace Lords also looked at him with approval, nodding and smiling slightly. Their praise grew even more obvious when they saw Yi Feimu crush the pill again. The 4,000 stairs disappeared. Striving for perfection is Yi Feimu's weakness and also his strength, said Yi Yunshin, smiling. This kid's determination is something you rarely see in others. I hope that after becoming a Violet Furnace Lord, he will retain his tenacity and use it to tread into realms we have not. As they discussed, and Zehai sat there silently, looking only at Meng Hao. Slowly, the shock in his eyes grew more intense. Fatty gave an inward sigh as he looked at the screen with Meng Hao on it. There's no way to compare. Ah, Meng Hao, why did you have to encounter somebody so inhuman? How can you possibly compare to this Yi guy? As the discussions proceeded, the other alchemists on Violet East Mountain continued to produce medicinal pills, Meng Hao included. When Meng Hao's pill was completed, a roaring sound filled the air, and a second stair appeared. This immediately caused muffled laughter to rise up from the cultivators on the outside world. They seemed to find the appearance of a single stone step to be quite amusing. Meng Hao's expression remained the same as he began his third minor pill. Time passed slowly. Meng Hao was by far in last place. In the third region, Chu Yuyan held first. She had concocted 8 pills and was working on her 9th. Up ahead on the mountain were 8,888 stone steps. It was an astonishing sight, already recognized by the observers. She was now being viewed as a possible contender with Yi Feimu. This was especially the opinion among many alchemists of the East Pill Division. Quite a few greatly admired Chu Yuyan, and as they watched, their eyes burned with passion and hope as they wished her luck. Besides Yi Feimu and Meng Hao, among the other candidates was an old man who had concocted 30 pills to produce a total of more than 8,300 stairs. Before, he hadn't attracted much attention, but now, of course, people were talking about him. He had produced a lot of medicinal pills. However, all of them stemmed from his own Tao of alchemy. As for the others, anywhere from 5,000 to more than 7,000 stairs had appeared. Meng Hao only had 8 steps. A single stone step had appeared each time he concocted one of the 8 minor pills. However, Meng Hao was not in last place, rather Yi Feimu was. Of course, nobody actually believed him to be in last place. He was currently concocting a pill for the 9th time. The previous pill, the 8th one, had immediately produced 9,300 stairs. That, of course, had caused a commotion in the outside world. Surprise had even been visible in the eyes of some of the patriarchs from the outside sects. Slowly, everyone on the mountaintop grew quiet, settling their chi and calming their minds. They looked at the paths on the 8 screens in front of them. They could clearly see that the moment of truth had arrived in the 3rd region test. Any moment now, people would begin to pass on to the next region. After enough time passed for 2 incense sticks to burn, Chu Yuyan's medicinal pill emerged. This was her 9th pill. Immediately a black-colored cloud appeared above her pill furnace, the size of a hand. Electricity crackled, circling around above the pill furnace. The pill furnace emitted a roaring sound and the 9th pill flew out. The path up ahead of Chu Yuyan immediately extended. It grew from 8,888 stone stairs all the way to 9,999. The absolute limit of stairs was 10,000. Chu Yuyan had created an incredible number of stairs. Reaching such an achievement in the Violet Furnace Lord trial by fire proved that she was an outstanding talent, worthy of being a Violet Furnace Lord. Immediately, conversations broke out in the world outside. A tribulation cloud appeared. That only happens for the most difficult to concoct medicinal pills. Chu Yuyan is definitely worthy to be Grandmaster Pill Demon's apprentice. This is clear proof that she is qualified to be a Violet Furnace Lord. 9,999 stairs. Chu Yuyan's skill in the Tao of alchemy is shocking. All eyes were on her, including master alchemists, furnace lords, violet furnace lords, sect patriarchs. This chapter was sponsored by Vidyapati, Karen Nguyen, and Anonymous. Chapter 286, The Most Powerful. Chu Yuyan took a deep breath and strode forward, walking directly up the stairs she had created. Everyone else was still concocting. The old man who had been in second place had now created more than 9,000 steps. Barring unforeseen circumstances, he would be second to pass through the third region. However, it was just then that a shocking thunderclap sounded from the celestial land. Concurrent with the sound, a tribulation cloud nearly 300 meters in diameter appeared above Yi Feimu's pill furnace. The tribulation cloud roiled in midair as thunderclaps echoed. It seemed to desire to destroy the pill which had just been concocted. The thunder existed only within the world of the celestial land. Outside on Eastern Emergence Mountain, where the audience was, the weather was sunny with a gentle breeze. Everyone was closely watching Yi Feimu's screen and the tribulation clouds within the celestial land. Intense praise filling his eyes, Violet Furnace Lord Yi Yunshin said, "Tribulation clouds. It seems the pill Feimu concocted has provoked pill tribulation." Just as the tribulation cloud was about to explode downward, Pill Demon lifted his hand and waved toward the screen. Immediately, the tribulation cloud quivered and began to disperse. The lightning completely dissipated. At the same moment, Yi Feimu's pill furnace exploded as a pill emerged. It was a 9-colored pill, containing all 9 colors of the 9 treasures pearl curtain plant flowers. However, it also used their properties to produce a 10th medicinal property. As soon as the pill appeared, the stairs in front of Yi Feimu boomed. Step after step appeared, 10, 100, 1,000, all the way to 10,000. Chu Yuyan would have had to produce more steps to make her stairs complete. In the blink of an eye, Yi Feimu had risen from last place to first. He flicked his sleeve, and the pill furnace disappeared. As he proceeded up the stairs, he immediately became the focus of attention. Such a chosen of the Tao of alchemy, 10,000 stairs. Who else could possibly be the Violet Furnace Lord other than him? It seems that he really and truly is Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. It just so happened that at this exact moment, Meng Hao's 9th minor pill emerged, adding 1 more stair. Now there were 9. When compared with 10,000, 9 steps were almost insignificant. Meng Hao's expression was the same as ever. He had no idea what was happening on the outside. He had no clue regarding the commotion caused by Chu Yuyan and Yi Feimu. His expression was as earnest as ever as he took his 9 minor pills and placed them all into the pill furnace. He took a deep breath and, eyes filled with determination, began to concoct a pill which conformed to his own Tao of alchemy, a pill which would be in accord with his skill and would be a return to the simplicity of nature. As the pills entered the pill furnace, Meng Hao's eyes slowly closed. His hands pushed out into the air as he began to concoct. Meng Hao's actions went relatively unnoticed thanks to Yi Feimu's shocking scene. The only people who seemed to notice were Fatty, Han Bei, and Nzehai. Yi Feimu walked slowly up the steps, looking like a chosen. His screen was the focal point atop the mountain. The only other who could compete was Chu Yuyan. As for the others, they had fallen far behind. After the time it takes an incense stick to burn, the old man finally concocted enough pills. The 9,937th step appeared. His pill furnace exploded, and the 9 treasures pearl curtain plant disappeared. He had reached his peak. He took a deep breath as he began to ascend the stairs. Behind him, time continued to pass. The remaining candidates continued to persevere. To be able to participate in this trial by fire indicated that these were no ordinary alchemists. They might be a bit slower, but even the least among the group was able to create more than 9,600 stairs before his pill furnace exploded and he proceeded up. Unfortunately, missing hundreds of stairs in the Violet East Mountain trial by fire was an indication of failure. Several people were forced pale-faced to admit defeat when they reached the end of the stairs they had created. Only a middle-aged man happened to succeed. Of the group of 8 just now, only 5 were left. 4 had already succeeded. Only Meng Hao was still concocting a medicinal pill. Other than Fatty, Han Bei, and Nzehai, no one else was paying any attention to him at all. All of them were looking at the screens of Yi Feimu and Chu Yuyan. Until, about half an incense stick later, the faint sound of thunder suddenly echoed out. This attracted some attention. Almost immediately, more thunder could be heard, this time much clearer. Everyone suddenly began to look around, confused, trying to figure out which screen the sound was coming from. When their eyes finally came to rest on Meng Hao's screen, thunder pealed out for the third time, echoing out loud enough to shake the heavens and rock the earth, filling the entire world of the celestial land which could be seen on the screens. More and more people turned their gazes from Yi Feimu and Chu Yuyan to look at Meng Hao. Immediately, they began to gape. This was because, although Meng Hao's expression was one of unprecedented concentration, above the pill furnace in front of him was a roiling black cloud 300 meters in diameter. It looked exactly the same as the cloud which had appeared above Yi Feimu. Fang Mu. Don't tell me he also concocted some type of astonishing pill. As astonishment spread throughout the mountain peak, and Zehai began to breathe heavily, and his eyes shone with an incredible light. His unusual expression immediately attracted the notice of the other violet furnace lords. Suddenly, another incredible peal of thunder boomed out, far more intense than the previous three by at least 10 times. Meng Hao's pill furnace trembled violently. Up above, the tribulation cloud rapidly expanded, from 300 meters to 3,000. This caused shock to fill the hearts of everyone in the outside world. But then, a fifth, a sixth, and then a seventh heaven-shaking thunderclap rang out. The thunder shook the celestial land, and the screens began to flicker, as if they were experiencing some sort of interference. Tribulation clouds swelled outward. By now, they were several tens of thousands of meters in diameter. The scene caused the minds of the cultivators in the outside world to reel. What's going on? What medicinal pill did he concoct to cause this? Yi Feimu's pill didn't provoke such shocking tribulation clouds. Everyone was in an uproar. It was impossible for them not to be astonished. Before, they had believed the scene caused by Yi Feimu to be incredible, but now they were struck dumb. This was truly incredible. The thunder echoed out throughout almost the entire world of the celestial land. The sound of thunder rose up to the heavens. Now, it wasn't just Meng Hao's screen that was flickering, but all of the screens. They distorted and twisted so violently that it seemed they might rip apart and disintegrate. Even more shocking was that, clearly visible to everyone on the mountaintop outside, the rest of the candidates had all stopped in their tracks. Their expressions flickered and began to fill with disbelief. Obviously, all of them could hear the thunder and see the tribulation clouds. This caused shock to fill everyone's hearts. Yi Feimu's pill had definitely caused an extraordinary sight. However, only he had been able to see it. The candidates were all within the celestial land and on the same mountain. However, they were treading different paths, so no matter what the others did, they wouldn't be able to see or sense it. But right now, a shocking scene was unfolding. The booming caused by Meng Hao's medicinal pill was breaking through any such barriers, making it so that all the candidates could see the tribulation clouds. How could this be happening? Furnace Lord Fang Mu, what is he doing? Fatty stared open-mouthed, panting. Suddenly, an excited glow filled his eyes and his body began to tremble. Inside, he was yelling out, crying for Meng Hao to become famous. It seemed possible that he was more excited at the moment than Meng Hao was. Han Bei's eyes glittered. Her expression quickly returned to normal, but inside, she was thinking that this was what she had expected of Fang Mu. And Zehai sat there cross-legged, his eyes shining with an intense light. All of the other violet furnace lords were staring with unprecedented concentration at what was happening. It was at this moment that the ninth thunderclap rose up. Its appearance caused the entire world of the celestial land to quake. Atop Violet East Mountain, Chu Yuyan, Yi Feimu and the others all felt the shaking. Up above them, they saw the sky completely covered with endless tribulation clouds. They were huge and never-ending, thick, black and stacked in layers. As the booming rattled out, an uncountable amount of lightning bolts began to surge about in the clouds. The power on display was astonishing. "Who is doing this?" murmured Chu Yuyan, her face pale. It was as if she had lost her mind. She had no way to see who had instigated such a shocking scene. The first person who appeared in her mind was Yi Feimu. However, for some unknown reason, his image was suddenly replaced by someone who made her feel incredibly irritated. Yi Feimu's face drained of blood. He stared mutely up into the sky, one expression after another flickering across his face. Disbelief, confusion, and a variety of other complicated expressions appeared. His mind was suddenly blank. What happened next was even more astonishing. As the ninth thunderclap could be heard, it was Yi Feimu, Chu Yuyan, and the others on East Violet Mountain who were shocked. Completely unpredictable was that this ninth thunderclap influenced the outside world. In the sky above Eastern Emergence Mountain, black, roiling clouds suddenly appeared. Within them, lighting danced back and forth, and a rumbling roaring could be heard. When this happened, and Sohe leaped to his feet. The other violet furnace lords who sat around him also had expressions of shock written on their faces. Pill Demon sat there quietly for a moment, then lifted up his right hand and flicked his finger. The same move he had used to dissipate Ye Famu's tribulation clouds was enough to get rid of the thunder and tribulation in the outside world. However, the tribulation clouds within the celestial land were still there. Seeing that the tribulation clouds were about to reach the point where they would erupt, Meng Hao began to sweat. However, his eyes filled with determination. After the space of a few breaths passed, he growled, then pushed out both hands toward the pill furnace. As he did this, a roaring sound filled the air. Popping sounds rang out as cracks spread out over the surface of the pill furnace. A moment later it exploded, and a colorless medicinal pill flew out. Suddenly, the tribulation clouds up above began to shrink in on themselves. A massive lightning bolt as thick as a person began to descend. Pill Demon's eyes glittered and he said, "Disperse." It was one word. However, it caused the entire world of the celestial land to suddenly tremble as if some new intangible rule had been proclaimed within it. This rule seemed as if it could affect everything inside. It warped the sky, changed the lightning bolt, covered the tribulation clouds, causing them to suddenly disappear. It was as if the sky had instantly been replaced. Meng Hao stretched out his hand and grasped the semi-transparent medicinal pill. Everything was still and quiet in the outside world. All eyes were glued to Meng Hao's screen and his right hand. The master alchemists, furnace lords, violet furnace lords, and all the disciples of the visiting sects, even the late nascent soul stage sub-patriarchs, were all staring at the same thing. What they wanted to know was, considering this medicinal pill had elicited such a shocking reaction, something that had even rippled out into the outside world, how many stone steps would it create? Chapter 287, Creating Something Out of Nothing. A moment passed and there were still 9 steps, not one more, not one less. Nonetheless, no one made a comment. This was because Meng Hao opened his hand and the transparent pill floated up in front of him. Then, it blossomed with 9 glowing colored lights. The light formed into the shape of a 9 treasures pearl curtain plant. The plant was vivid and lifelike. The instant it appeared, it attracted everyone's attention. Shock, amazement, and disbelief filled every mind. And Sohe's voice broke the silence. "This is creating something out of nothing." He was panting as he rose to his feet. Earlier, he had guessed this might happen, but seeing it with his own eyes sent his mind reeling. Normally, he would never have made such an outburst. He was an alchemist, and stubborn pursuit was part of the Tao of alchemy. He was the type who would never reveal his emotions, but in this regard, his sentiments ruled him. A great Tao of alchemy, returning to the simplicity of nature, creating something out of nothing. As Sohe's voice echoed, everyone watched as Meng Hao lifted his foot onto the first step. He walked slowly up the 9 steps, then raised his foot into the emptiness. As it descended, a 10th step appeared. He walked forward. More steps appeared beneath his feet. The limitation of number had already been exceeded. This was a realm far past that of Ye Famu. Most people didn't even understand such a realm. However, the 8 violet furnace lords did. His heart trembling, Lin Heilong was the second to rise. With a gasp, he said, "Fang Mu didn't just concoct a pill, he concocted a seed. A 9 treasures pearl curtain plant seed." Shock filled his eyes. He took an illusory model based on the Tao of alchemy and then concocted a real seed. If you plant this seed, a 9 treasures pearl curtain plant will likely grow within a few years. But the ingredients he used were all illusory, not real. This realm is creating something out of nothing. After Sohe and Lin Heilong finished speaking, silence reigned. The master alchemist sat mutely. The furnace lords breathed heavily. All who had laughed at him earlier felt their minds spinning, as if slapped by an invisible palm. After the space of a few breaths passed, an incredible hubbub broke out. Creating something out of nothing. Fang Mu was able to take something that didn't really exist and use it to make something real. What level of skill in the Tao of alchemy does that represent? Is Ye Famu the strongest, or is this Fang Mu even better? The people from the visiting sects weren't able to discern what was going on. The only thing that was abundantly clear was the shock they saw on the faces of the violet furnace lords. Of their number, only Yi Yunchen had a gloomy look on his face. He frowned as he looked at Meng Hao's screen. A breathtaking medicinal pill. The disciples from the visiting sects were shocked by the scene playing out in front of them. Truth be told, they had been shocked over and over from the moment this trial by fire began. However, this moment was the most shocking yet. Creating something from nothing, concocting pills in a celestial land, refining the rules of alchemy, turning an illusory nine treasures pearl curtain plant into an actual seed, all caused waves of shock. As of now, they had forgotten Chu Yuyan and Yi Feimu. All eyes were fixed like glue onto Meng Hao. He was the focus of attention of all the people here. Fatty was panting. Han Bei's eyes shone with a strange light as she looked at Meng Hao. Li Shiqi's expression was one of fascination. She herself had never imagined that alchemist Fang Mu would concoct a pill such as this. Chen Fan had never been very interested in alchemy, but he gaped in astonishment, and admiration grew within his heart for Fang Mu. Patriarch Violet Civ from the Black Civ sect laughed. Starting today, the name of alchemist Fang Mu will be known to everyone within the southern domain. Sub-patriarchs from the other clans laughed and said similar things. When their words entered Yi Yunshan's ears, his face grew unsightly, and unconsciously he glanced toward his master, Pill Demon. Pill Demon's face was expressionless, which caused Yi Yunshan to sigh with relief. Turning his head to look at the other Violet Furnace Lords, he said, "Unless Master makes a specific choice, then everyone has a chance. Fang Mu may have some unique skills in pill concocting, but the general trend is clearly favoring Feimu to become the next Violet Furnace Lord." He gave meaningful looks to those among the Violet Furnace Lords with whom he was close. He felt a bit more calm after that, and when he looked back at Meng Hao's screen, his expression was the same as ever. His heart, however, was filled with rancor and cold laughter. Meng Hao had no way to know what was happening in the outside world. However, from the moment he had begun to concoct the pill, he had decided to make a big scene. At the moment, he was walking up the mountain path. Ahead of him was nothingness, but every step he took, more stone steps would appear to support him. Time passed. The buzz of conversation still filled the outside world when Meng Hao stepped onto the final stone step of the third region. He wasn't really sure how many total steps he had traversed. If he thought about it, then perhaps it was more than 10,000. Meng Hao didn't actually care about a specific number. It wasn't important. Who was it? Thought Chu Yuyan, her breathing heavy. She still wasn't sure who had caused the shocking scene just now. Whoever it was, that person was on a different path. Unless they were at the peak of mountain, it would be very difficult to see anything. At the moment, the first person that came to mind was, again, Yi Feimu. But then she hesitated. Suddenly she wasn't so sure. Something inside of her was telling her that it probably was Yi Feimu. And yet from her perspective, other than Yi Feimu, none of the other candidates, including herself, could possibly have done something like that. As she thought, determination filled her eyes. She turned and continued upward. The most conflicted of all was none other than Yi Feimu. He stood mutely on the stone steps, thinking for a very long time. Who was it? What pill did they concoct? I concocted one medicinal pill, the pinnacle. I can't believe that someone else's decision regarding the Tao of alchemy could surpass my own. In the third region, I definitely produced the most steps with the least amount of medicinal pills. I only concocted one. This person could not possibly have outdone me. Yi Feimu's pride caused pain in his heart, but it quickly vanished. I must be in first place. His eyes glittering, he raced forward, hurrying toward the end of the third region. In his preparations to participate in this trial by fire, Violet Furnace Lord Yi Yunshan had actually violated sect protocol by secretly telling him in detail about his own experience in the promotion trial by fire. For example, Yi Feimu knew that at the end of the third region, it was possible to see who had passed through the region, what method they had used to do so, and what position they were granted by the immortal land. His eyes filled with stubbornness, Yi Feimu hurried on, panting. In addition to Chu Yuyan and Yi Feimu, there was also the old man and the middle-aged man. They were also racing forward. Time passed. The first person to reach the end of the third region was Chu Yuyan. She leaped across the gap created by the last few missing steps. Then, a tremor ran through her body. She had just seen the boulder marking the beginning of the fourth region. The first thing which entered her vision was not the requirements for concocting a pill, but rather the rankings from the previous region, which floated in the air in front of the boulder. In third place was her own name, Chu Yuyan. Next to it were written the numbers 9,999. She gasped, then looked up toward second place. It was Yi Feimu's name, and the number was 10,000. 10,000. He really does deserve to be called Grandmaster Pill Cauldron. 10,000 steps marks perfection in the third region. However, how could he possibly have only placed second? She stared at the name for a moment, and her heart began to pound. Slowly, her gaze moved up until she saw the listing for first place. Instantly, a roaring sound filled her head and her eyes shone with disbelief. How could it be him? She was suddenly out of sorts. The boulder was spewing out massive amounts of violet chi, but she didn't notice. All she could do was stare at the rankings. "Fang Mu," muttered Yifeimu, his body trembling slightly. His eyes filled with disbelief and even more so shame. If it had been Chu Yuyan who beat him, he could have accepted it. But instead, it was someone he completely looked down upon. Furthermore, that person had surpassed him in the third region. As far as he was concerned, this was a complete humiliation. Actually, from the moment Fang Mu had been raised to Furnace Lord, he had aroused the dislike of the other Furnace Lords. That was especially true for Yifeimu. He held nothing but contempt for the manner in which Fang Mu had received his promotion. Next, Yifeimu's body trembled and began to fill with rage. This was because he had just seen the numbers written after Fang Mu's name. 10. 10 stone steps. 10 stone steps. I created a perfect set of 10,000 stone steps. How could a trifling 10 stone steps even compare? Just what pill did this Fang Mu concoct? Yifeimu wouldn't go so far as to question the fairness of the trial by fire, but inside, he just couldn't accept it. By now, he had already put the pieces together and realized who the pill tribulation had come for. Violet chi poured out from the boulder, but Yifeimu felt a sense of irony. His eyes filled with a cold light. Meng Hao stood in front of the fourth region boulder, looking at the rankings. His right hand lifted up, causing the image to scatter. Massive amounts of violet chi poured out, dense to the extreme. Those watching in the outside world could easily see the boundless extent of the violet chi and how much it exceeded that of Chu Yuyan's and Yifeimu's. Several hours passed, during which time, this point was even further impressed upon all onlookers. Meng Hao's black pill furnace absorbed the violet chi, and as it did, its color slowly changed. Now, it was no longer pitch black, but tinged with violet. At first glance, it would be hard to tell whether it was black or violet. However, the pill furnace was now struggling about half as much as it had before, and no longer as fiercely. About an hour later, the violet chi disappeared. Text gradually appeared on the boulder, revealing the requirements for the final region. Become an apprentice. Seeing these words caused Meng Hao's vision to suddenly blur and twist. The mountain in front of him was no longer a mountain. The sky above was no longer the same sky. This chapter was sponsored by Kok Yan Leung, Reginald Cleckley, Edwin Wanjohi, and Lim Derrick. Chapter 288, Peach Blossom. The mountain vanished. Far off in the distance, a mountain range was barely visible. The sky was no longer blue. Instead, it was red as flame because it was dusk. The dusk carried with it the afterglow of the setting sun, which trickled across the land to blanket over a small county-level city. The walls surrounding the city had existed for many years, which was clear from their ancient appearance. They were covered with blotches and marks, evidence of the passage of time. Atop the walls, a few guards lazed about. Occasionally, faint sounds of their laughter drifted down into the bordello below. There was a new girl in town, and their laughter contained the beauty of anticipation. Horse carts lined up to enter through the city gate. Atop each cart sat a driver brandishing a whip and bellowing directions to his horses as they ambled toward the city center. The sun was setting, but oppressive heat still held sway over the land, turning it into something like an oven that wanted to bake the earth. There was no wind or rain. The only thing that existed was arid heat. This walled city was not very large. It was only a county after all. People walked the streets in groups of 2 or 3, cooling themselves with fans, occasionally cursing the weather. The most lively places in the town were the tea houses, where a cup of cold tea could dispel a bit of the heat. On a sweltering summer evening like this, gossiping with friends and neighbors there was the primary pastime of the populace. Other than the tea houses was the town bordello, which was a place for rich people. Many men who passed by couldn't restrain themselves from glancing up at the gorgeously dressed young ladies who leaned against the wooden shutters up above. It was enough to make any man's heart burn, and then cause him to think about how unbearable the weather was. If a man's wife walked with him past the bordello, her face would twist with jealousy, and she would hastily pull him away. A more shrewish wife might look up at the licentious, headstrong girls up above and curse them a few times. The girls in the bordello were said to be as delicate as flowers and refined as jade, almost inhuman. Inside, the rooms were filled with ice cubes and servant girls with fans. Rich customers enjoyed an ice-cold breeze. Supposedly, the bordello also abounded with delicious food and wine. Every man wished to go there, either for the girls, the food, or the ice cubes. "Look, this place is awesome," said Meng Hao earnestly to the two kids next to him, clenching his fists. Both were around the same age, 12 or 13. You guys just don't have any brotherhood. Meng Hao put his arms around their shoulders. One was skinny, the other chubby. Both looked excited, but at the same time a bit shy and nervous. Meng Hao gave them a very serious look, as if he were a sect patriarch handing over a legacy. Tomorrow, I, young master, am being sent away to boarding school. From now on I'm handing over the title of Eastern Emergence County's one bully to you too. Don't forget, you can't ruin young master's reputation. If they were in some sacred location, perhaps his words would carry power. But the three of them were lying on their bellies atop a wall. What was inside the wall was nothing other than the bordello, and the wall they were on surrounded it. Further inside was a two-story building, connected to another building which filled the front of the courtyard. From their position on the wall, they could clearly see the shadows of men and women inside the second-story windows. The sound of chatting and laughter drifted out. The fat kid, whose face was covered with freckles, excitedly said, "Young Master Fang, don't worry. The name of the one bully in Eastern Emergence County will always belong to you. As for us two and three bullies, we will definitely maintain your reputation." The skinny kid next to him nodded enthusiastically. "Good, I know I can trust you too," Meng Hao replied solemnly. "However, you still need your gang initiation plaques. Today, your final test has arrived. Now pay attention. Soon, someone is gonna come out. When that happens, you have to throw these bricks as hard as you can." Each of the kids held a brick, which was about the size of their own hand. "That damned bastard," said Meng Hao through gritted teeth. "He dares to go chasing after my peach blossom. Young master is definitely going to find out who exactly it is who has the gall." He glared at the second story of the building. Panting, he continued, "Peach blossom promised me that she would wait until I grew up, and then she would sleep with me. Who could have guessed that some damned son of a B\TCH would dare to go pick on her?" His heart filled with rage. When the other two kids saw the look in his eyes, their hearts filled with intense admiration. He definitely deserves to be the elder brother, they thought. The one bully in Eastern Emergence County has a mistress. He's for sure the only 12-year-old kid in the entire county who could pull that off. They exchanged a glance, and their expressions grew more fanatical. As far as they were concerned, anyone who could enter the legendary bordello and get a mistress had skill that reached to the heavens. To be able to talk about it openly made them feel even more proud. Soon, enough time had passed for an incense stick to burn. Evening had fallen and the moon was rising. The second-floor balcony door opened, and a beautifully dressed young woman led a middle-aged man out by the arm. He appeared to be drunk, and they talked in soft tones as they emerged. The moonlight was thin and the sky somewhat dark, making it difficult to see their exact appearance. However, Meng Hao could instantly recognize Peach Blossom. Immediately his eyes grew red and he shouted, "You crusty son of a B\TCH, young master's gonna beat you to death. You dare to see my Peach Blossom." With a howl, he hurled the brick. With equally vicious howls, the two kids also threw their bricks. "Young master is gonna, huh?" Meng Hao was just about to charge into the courtyard when his body began to tremble. The drunk, middle-aged man easily dodged the three bricks and then raised his head furiously. As soon as he saw Meng Hao, he gave a slight smile. Then his fury burned hotter. "You little bastard," he cried, "this is mutiny." Meng Hao instantly began to shiver. "Father," all of his ardor and sincerity evaporated, as if freezing water had been poured over his body. He immediately leaped off of the wall and began to run. His two sidekicks' faces went pale with fear, and their calves burned as they raced off. "We're finished, finished. Fang Mu's father is the former one bully in the county. Now he's a constable, so he can kill people without blinking an eye." The two kids' faces were as pale as death as they fled. After the three of them vanished, the middle-aged man stood in the courtyard, both angry and amused. The idea of a son making a move on his father was both infuriating and hilarious. That little bastard never studies and has no skills whatsoever. Sending him to study in boarding school is definitely the right decision. Late that night, Meng Hao ambled through the streets, heaving continuous sighs. When he finally reached the main gate of his house, he looked at the lights shining from within and gave a deep frown. Why did it have to be Dad? Oh, Mother, you left too early. If you hadn't gone, things wouldn't be like this. I'm going to go have a few words with him for you. He had just pushed open the gate leading into the courtyard when suddenly he began to cry. "Mother, I miss you. Mother, you visited me in my dreams last night and told me to go visit Peach Blossom. Mother." "Shut up," bellowed an angry voice from within the house. The door opened to reveal Meng Hao's father, the middle-aged man from before. His brow was furrowed and he looked haplessly at Meng Hao. "Quit your faking. Why aren't you in bed yet? I'm taking you to the boarding school early in the morning to meet your new teacher." "I'm not going," cried Meng Hao, taking a step back. "I want to go to regular school. All the people in the city are going to laugh at me." "You little bastard, still up to the same old tricks at your age." The man frowned, then suddenly rushed forward and grabbed Meng Hao, who was just getting ready to run away. He lifted him into the air and spanked him on the bottom a few times. The slapping sounds rang out clearly, but there was no pain. Things had been like this for Meng Hao since he was young. He and his father had only each other to depend on. Every time they had some sort of disagreement, his father would put on the appearance of being very strict, but couldn't actually bear to hit him hard. "What good is regular school?" his father roared. "You need to learn to respect the teachers and their teachings. You need to learn about ethics. Are you gonna go or not?" "I'm not going," cried Meng Hao, his eyes rolling. "You?" Meng Hao's father raised his hand high into the air. Meng Hao hurriedly said, "If you promise to never go see Peach Blossom again, then I'll go. You can go see anybody else, just not her." He was afraid his father might actually start to spank him hard this time. Meng Hao's father wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. He lowered his hand, placing it onto Meng Hao's head and tousling it gently. "All right, you're growing up, kid, and I can see that you have a fertile imagination. Fine. From now on, I'll never see Peach Blossom again. I'll leave her for you. After you grow up, I'll arrange for her to be your concubine." "Really?" said Meng Hao, his eyes growing bright. "You're still not in bed." He glared at Meng Hao as he released him. Meng Hao beamed with joy as he ran into the house, threw off his clothes, and jumped into bed. He had some beautiful dreams that night. Early the next morning, when the sky was just beginning to grow light, Meng Hao's eyes were blurry as his father dressed him. Father glanced at son and could see he hadn't gotten enough sleep. A solemn expression covered his face, along with love and kindness, something Meng Hao didn't often see. He reached down and picked up Meng Hao, just like he had when he was young. Meng Hao's head fell onto his shoulder, and he continued to sleep. Meng Hao's father grabbed the gift he planned to present to the teacher, and then left. Along the way, his gait was a bit unsteady. Carrying such a large boy wasn't an easy task. An hour later, they reached the main gate of the house of a famous old man who lived in the east part of the city. Meng Hao's father woke Meng Hao up and then put him down. Then, he knocked on the door and entered the courtyard. Meng Hao was left yawning out in the courtyard as his father entered the house, so he didn't see his father respectfully clasping hands and making other imploring gestures. Not much time passed before his father emerged. Next to him was an old man with a full head of white hair. His features were ancient but full of vigor. It gave him a noble and prestigious bearing, much different from that of an ordinary person. This was especially true of his eyes. They were filled with profundity, as if they contained stars within them. Anyone who looked at them would be entranced. The old man gazed down at Meng Hao. This gaze seemed to be able to see lives that had been lived, and lives yet to be lived. This gaze seemed capable of piercing through the haze to see all three lives, past, present, and future. This gaze made it seem as if this young man's entire life had been lived for the purpose of coming here, and counting 3 times to become his apprentice. A long moment passed, and the old man nodded slightly. Meng Hao's father looked down at Meng Hao and said, "A master is like a father. Fang Mu, I want you to respect your master. Respect him even more than you respect me. If you can't do that, then you aren't my son." With that, he left. Chapter 289, Which Path to Choose? Meng Hao gaped at his father. He'd forgotten how long it had been since he'd seen him act so strictly. The seriousness of his tone caused him to wake up. A master is like a father. Meng Hao watched his father's back as he left. He clearly was wearing a simple, unlined robe. However, for some reason, it seemed to Meng Hao as if he were surrounded by a violet wind. The wind seemed to shatter some barrier in his mind. Suddenly, an image appeared. It was his father. The image was blurry, but he could tell that his father was looking at him and sighing softly. His mother was there too, gazing at him warmly. It looked like there were tears in her eyes. For some reason, there was also a Tower of Tang, as well as many, many complicated memories. Meng Hao thought for a long moment before shaking his head roughly and turning to look off in the distance. There, in the middle of the county, was a very tall tower. It was a Tower of Tang. That wasn't there before, was it? No, it never was. A confused look appeared on Meng Hao's face. In the midst of his confusion, an ancient-sounding voice reached his ears. "This isn't a boarding school." As his father disappeared into the distance, Meng Hao turned to look at the old man in front of him. Now that his father was gone, only he and the old man were in the courtyard. The old man looked down at Meng Hao, then slowly continued, "I've had 17 apprentices. A few ended up returning to dust. A few left and forged their own path. Some are still pondering what they wish to pursue. In fact, some don't really count as my apprentices. As of today, you are my 18th apprentice. However, I'm going to call you Little Ninth." As the man spoke, all sound faded until Meng Hao was focused completely on him. "You have a junior sister. She became my apprentice before you, but in a bit of an unorthodox fashion, so she ranks below you. She is surnamed Chu." Meng Hao felt nervous. He didn't know whether to kneel and kowtow or bend from the waist with clasped hands. He was completely ill at ease. "I haven't used my own name for a long time," said the old man. "Outsiders call me by my alchemist name. Friends call me Mr. East. I've never been married, so I have no heir. My apprentices are my heirs. Eventually you will pass on my teachings, and the mark I have made on the world will be extended by you. My apprentices are my closest relatives." The old man gazed at Meng Hao, looking majestic. However, his eyes were warm and filled with kindness and love. It seemed as if he had been watching Meng Hao for years, testing him. "From now on, I'm your master." Without thinking, Meng Hao responded, "Respect master, venerate the Tao. Master is like a father." "There's no need to say such things," said the old man, his eyes gleaming with keen light. "As long as they exist in your heart, that is enough. Little Nine, kneel." In the blink of an eye, his entire person became the pinnacle of heaven and earth. Meng Hao couldn't really describe exactly what he was feeling. It was as if, in this instant, the old man had become the heavens. And yet, he was not cold, but instead filled with deep kindness and warmth. It was as if he were a mountain that could shield against wind and rain alike. Meng Hao bowed his head and got down on his knees. As he was kneeling, he could not see how everything above him in the sky had stopped moving. The clouds were still. The birds no longer flitted about. The earth did not quake, but everything within the city grew silent. "As my apprentice, you only kowtow twice in life, at least in the true sense of the word. The first time is upon becoming an apprentice. This kowtow sows karma with me, whereupon our fates are intertwined. If you do not break this connection, then neither shall I. As for the second kowtow, wait until you come to your senses, then come ask me about it, and I will tell you." The first kowtow upon becoming an apprentice is actually divided into 3 further kowtows, those of the innocence, the roaming, and the sunset gazing. Your kowtow today is the kowtow of innocence. Meng Hao didn't really understand. However, he placed his hands onto the ground and kowtowed deeply. With this kowtow, the sky sprung back into motion. The winds and the clouds swept along. The birds flew. With this kowtow, the earth shook, as past events flitted dreamlike through the minds of all the living creatures. With this kowtow, past life karma, future karma, present life. If you do not sever it, then I shall not sever it. The old man laughed contentedly. It echoed about, filled with emotion, satisfaction, kindness, and duty. From this day forward, the young man in front of him was his apprentice. In the future, the young man's every action would be marked by him. From now on, he was the young man's master. This is karma. Karma is not something predestined, but something decided by people. It can be called fate, not fate determined by the heavens, nor doom from the underworld, but something decided between 2 people. One person decides to take another as master, the other decides to take an apprentice. This creates karma. His voice soft, the old man said, "You must still experience the kowtow of roaming and the kowtow of sunset gazing. Throughout the process, you will be able to choose from many paths. As for which path you choose, that is your decision. If in the end you are able to perform the kowtow of sunset gazing, then that will name us master and apprentice. No one will ever be able to sever that bond. I will accept no gifts in becoming your master. I have already accepted everything I need to accept." He reached down and softly tousled Meng Hao's hair. His smile was kind as he helped Meng Hao to his feet. Meng Hao still didn't really understand. As he stood, he looked at his master and could feel the kindness and love within him. Beneath the man's gaze, he could also feel a warmth deep inside of himself. He nodded his head solemnly. Springs and autumns came and went. Years passed. Meng Hao was now 19. In the past 7 years, he spent most of his time living with Master, studying, observing the cool breeze and white clouds, gazing at the moon and stars. After reading many books, he finally understood what it meant to respect Master and venerate the Tao. He also understood that the world was very large. During the 7 years, his father had aged. Master had grown older. Peach Blossom's popularity in the bordello waned. Eventually, a man from another county paid her debts and took her as a concubine. Before she left, she came looking for Meng Hao. It seemed she viewed him as a little brother. She spoke tender words, then, accompanied by Meng Hao's smile, got into a sedan chair and left Eastern Emergence County. According to their agreement from years ago, his two friends really did grow up to become the biggest bullies in the county. Meng Hao, however, no longer called himself a bully. He didn't wear fancy, expensive clothes, but instead a simple scholar's robe. It was green, just like the greenness of his youth. However, in just the same manner that spring changes into autumn, his face no longer carried the frivolity it used to, but instead calmness. He liked to think, and to gaze off into the sky, even though he didn't really know exactly what it was he was looking at. He liked the wind and the rain. He liked to stand in the pavilion and look at the lightning off in the distance and hear the thunder. When the rain fell down onto the earth outside, he liked to open up a book and read about how life had changed throughout the ages. Everything was like a dream. 7 years passed like the falling of a rainstorm. Meng Hao didn't feel like he had changed much, but from the perspective of others, he had changed quite a bit. As he watched his master continue to grow older, he often thought of bringing up the subject of the roaming. He wanted to climb mountains, travel to distant lands, to see the realities of the world. But in the end, he looked at the city, his father and master, and instead maintained his silence, saying nothing. A year, another year. Soon, 7 more years had passed. During autumn of that year, as the leaves drifted down to the ground, floating in the wind to return to the earth, his father fell sick. One night, a violent wind blew and his father passed away. Meng Hao stood in front of his father's grave, a blank look in his eyes. He vaguely remembered how, 14 years ago, his father had held him in his arms and taken him to meet Master. In the blink of an eye, 14 years had passed. Meng Hao stood there silently, sipping from a pot of alcohol. Finally, he turned and left. He found Master and told him how he desired the roaming. It was the only dream he possessed now, and had been fermenting in his heart for years. Before he left, Meng Hao kneeled before Master and kowtowed a second time. This was the kowtow of roaming. Master watched early one morning as Meng Hao shouldered his scholar's pack and walked off into the distance, framed by the rising sun. Eventually, Meng Hao looked over his shoulder. By that time, Master was no longer visible. Later, he looked over his shoulder a second time, and even the Tower of Tang couldn't be seen. He was thoughtful for a moment, then gradually seemed to come to an understanding. He looked forward once again and continued to walk off into the distance. He did not look over his shoulder a third time. He reached a mighty river and encountered a ferryman, with whom he chatted about some of the legends of the river. Supposedly, an immortal resided somewhere here. In the books Meng Hao had read, he had occasionally come across the title immortal. He decided to live next to the river. Unfortunately, in the 3 years that he did, he never saw an immortal. What did see, however, was his own inverted reflection in the river waters, a different him. He saw himself flying in the sky, practicing cultivation in the mountains, and some place called the East Pill Division of the Violet Fate Sect, where he concocted. It seemed as if all he had to do was jump into the water, and he could become that other person, and this life would be over. By the time the 3 years had passed, Meng Hao was 29 years old. In the end, he did not jump into the water. Instead, he left the river and traveled far off to another place. A year later, in the depths of a seemingly endless forest, on a blustery and nearly moonless night, Meng Hao caught sight of a woman floating in the air. There was also an abandoned tomb, with no incense burning in front of it. The surrounding forest was pitch black, and Meng Hao was a bit scared. A moment later, he found himself surrounded by countless shadowy forms. Suddenly, a sealing incantation popped into his mind. He extended his palm, and everything around him vanished. Starting then, he was very curious about this dark, mysterious forest. He continued to travel about in it, sleeping in thickets when necessary. He saw many, many strange things, including a variety of fantastic, fierce, and wild beasts. It took 3 years to travel through the forest. When he emerged, he looked back, and an absent-minded look covered his face. He had the feeling that if he wished, he could stay and become a part of the forest. In a place like this, a person could become one with heaven and earth, and transcend the mortal life. As Meng Hao gazed at the forest, he thought back to Master's words from 21 years ago. There are many paths in life, as to which path he would choose. That was his decision to make. This place is not the path I wish to tread. Lost in thought, Meng Hao turned and walked off into the distance. This chapter was sponsored by Darren Chen. Chapter 290, This Life. 2 years later, Meng Hao was 35. It had been 9 years since he left home. However, he had only lived in two places, the river and the forest. This year, he ran into a gang of bandits. Bandits are generally killers, but they didn't kill Meng Hao. Perhaps it was his worn scholar's robe or the pack he carried. He certainly appeared unlucky. The bandit leader was a beautiful, seductive woman. She asked him a single question. "Can you keep financial records?" Meng Hao shook his head. However, they took him anyway. They led him to their mountain fort, a stockaded village where more than 1,000 people lived. Most were family members of the bandits, including children. It was arranged for Meng Hao to become a teacher, which mostly involved instructing the children how to read. He didn't have to teach anything very complicated. They just needed to be able to read banknotes and understand basic messages, things that any good bandit should be able to do. This was a requirement laid upon all the bandits by the beautiful bandit chiefess. Time trickled by. Meng Hao adapted and quickly felt at home. He taught reading and looked up at the sky. It was almost like life in eastern Emergence County. Sometimes he thought of Master or his father and how he hadn't swept his grave for a long time. People died every month in the mountain fort. During a 3-year period, the camp moved locations twice. In the 4th year, the army came. The mountain fort faced overwhelming numbers. At a critical moment of life and death, Meng Hao unhesitatingly proposed using poison. At the moment, a north wind was blowing, and the army was located to the south. Meng Hao wasn't sure why exactly he had thought of using poison. It was just that, in the past few years, he seemed to have an abundance of knowledge in his head. The poison was of course concocted by Meng Hao. As the poison powder drifted south with the wind, Meng Hao closed his eyes. A long time later, he heard shouts of rejoicing. It had been a massacre. The mountain village had won. Meng Hao was 39 years old. That night, during the third watch, something like burning fire burrowed under the covers with him. It was the bandit chiefess. During the day, she was a conservative woman, but right now she was like a beautiful spirit. Overnight, Meng Hao's life changed. He was no longer a teacher, but instead a so-called military advisor. He had never experienced such a life before. It was fresh and exciting. Soon he was 40 years old. He was past the prime of life when the blood boiled, and yet all of this was addicting. Killing, plundering. For 3 years, no blood physically stained Meng Hao's hands. However, with his assistance, the number of lives taken by the bandits increased by tenfold. That winter, Meng Hao finally got fed up with it all. He had not chosen this life and wanted to leave. But the mountain fort had grown very large. When he brought up leaving, the chiefess refused to allow it. But Meng Hao persisted and left anyway. Therefore, they tried to chase him down and kill him. They chased him for a year before finally giving up. In the end, Meng Hao wasn't killed. Exhausted, he turned, and there, 100 paces behind him, was the chiefess. She sat atop a horse, staring at him, a black bow in her hand. She was older but still beautiful, and within her eyes was torn expression. The wind blew past the two of them. Meng Hao shouldered the same scholar's pack he'd taken with him when he left his hometown, turned around, and walked off into the distance. No arrow was loosed from the bow. That year, Meng Hao was 43 years of age. Eventually, he caught sight of a Taoist temple on top of a mountain. It was autumn, and the leaves rustled as they drifted down onto the green limestone. The sky was overcast, and occasionally soft thunder rumbled. Rain was coming. Meng Hao took up residence in the Taoist temple. He watched the Taoists practice their religious cultivation, observed them live their daily lives, and enjoyed a kind of peace he had never experienced before. He had the unshakable feeling that his hands were stained dark with blood that just wouldn't wash off. Perhaps in this place he could discover a way to cleanse it. 2 years later, Meng Hao was 45 years old. He let out a soft sigh. It turns out there's no way to cleanse it. In that case, I'll just have to live with it. Shaking his head, he bid farewell to the Taoist temple and strode out once again into the world. Eventually, he reached the capital city. After he had been living there for a year, a bloody war broke out with a neighboring nation. Despite his age, Meng Hao was forcefully conscripted into the military and became a soldier in the army. The war between the two countries had just started at this point. 2 years into the war, Meng Hao used some poison that he had concocted to win a battle that shocked both of the countries involved. This sparked his rise to prominence. He was no longer a common soldier, but a poison specialist. 5 years into the war, he was a general. He led a special offensive, commanding a force of 100,000 soldiers, along with a special unit of 100 personally trained poison specialists. 8 years into the war, the enemy withdrew from the battlefield and turned to defense. Meng Hao was more than 50 years old, and his name was famous throughout the entire nation. He led his men into the enemy nation in a campaign to destroy them thoroughly. By the 10th year of the war, Meng Hao was 56. It had been 30 years since he left his hometown. The enemy was destroyed. He returned to his home nation and was welcomed with grand ceremony. He was now a legend, and as such was conferred with the title Royal Advisor. Everything was like a dream, and Meng Hao wasn't used to it. Perhaps it was because of him or perhaps because of the nation's growing power, but after becoming the royal advisor, the nation turned into an aggressor. A new round of wars began. Year after year passed, and eventually, Meng Hao was 60 years old. Once again fed up with everything, he left the army and returned to the areas that had been scorched by the flames of war. Pestilence raged there. He was able to save the lives of a few people, after which he was the royal advisor no longer, but a doctor, the alchemy doctor. He continued to travel, pursuing the dream he'd had when he was young, climbing mountains and traveling to distant lands. However many people he had killed in the past, that was how many he would save. His travels lasted for 20 years. Throughout those 20 years, Meng Hao traveled through countless nations and climbed to the top of who knew how many mountain peaks. He saved many people, and soon, word of the miraculous hands of the alchemy doctor spread throughout the land. The year Meng Hao turned 80, he looked thoughtfully up into the sky. His weathered face bore the evidence of a life full of memories. I've traveled many paths in life, he thought, but as for my choice, just what is it? I did not choose to be the reflection in the river, nor did I choose the peaceful life of a hermit in the forest. I did not choose the romantic life of a bandit couple, nor to become a Taoist priest. I've given up on being a poison specialist or a royal advisor on waging war. I thought my final decision would be to become an alchemy doctor, but now, that's not my path either. Just what am I pursuing in this life? He looked up into the sky but could not think of any answer. He found only frustration and deep exhaustion. He missed home. That autumn night he sat beneath the stars. Next to his foot was a fallen leaf. He didn't notice as the wind whispered through the forest, picked it up and returned it to the tree. At the moment, he was like that leaf. He had been away from home for almost a full 60-year cycle. Now he needed to return. Meng Hao began to walk. After he had left home, it had taken him 54 years to reach this point. The return trip only took 6. Eastern Emergence County was still there, flourishing more than ever. Meng Hao's hair was white when he entered the city. He was just barely able to make out some of the traces of the past. The bordello was gone. The wall had long since been knocked down, and the location was now home to a large mansion. The house where he grew up had vanished with the passing of time. In its place was an inn. Meng Hao stood across from it for a very long time, staring at it. His face was covered not just with the ravages of time, but with a complex expression. Finally, he turned and left. When he returned to Master's house, the person who opened the door was a stranger. After making some inquiries, Meng Hao turned his head to look at East Mountain off in the distance. His father had been buried there more than 50 years ago. Master had been buried there more than 20 years ago. Meng Hao sighed. Silently holding a pot of alcohol under his arm, he climbed the mountain. First, he visited his father's grave, which was covered in weeds. I know this is all an illusion, he said softly, and that you aren't my real father, however. You let me feel the fatherly love that I've been missing. It was only a simple embrace so that I could sleep. About 30 years ago, in the Taoist temple, he had come to understand everything. This world was nothing but an illusion, a test to become an apprentice. The real Meng Hao was still in the world of the celestial land in the Violet Fate sect, atop Violet East Mountain. He closed his eyes. A long time passed before he left his father's grave. Finally, he arrived at Master's grave. He looked at it for a while before speaking. Becoming an apprentice involves 3 kowtows, he murmured. The first is during the time of innocence. The second is in the time of roaming. The third is when gazing at the sunset. You gave me an entire life to decide whether or not to become your apprentice. Everything in this realm of illusions was created, not by you but me. You only provided the starting point. Every person in the trial by fire will create their own world. In this world I liberated my heart. I experienced everything. In the end I've come back here, but I still haven't found what it is that I wish to pursue. The Tao of alchemy? Obviously not. He lifted the jug of alcohol and took a long drink. Eternal life, he said quietly. I'm not qualified. Soon, the sun began to sink in the west and the jug of alcohol was empty. He did not begin the third kowtow. Instead, he turned and headed back toward Eastern Emergence County. He knew that once he performed the third kowtow, he would leave this world of illusions, but he still had not found his answer. Therefore, he would not leave. He would stay. From then on, a very old man took up residence in Eastern Emergence County. Outside of the world of illusions, within the violet fate celestial land, atop Violet East Mountain, tears seeped out of Chu Yuyan's eyes. She opened them, and they were filled with grief, as if being immersed in her world had caused her to forget about reality. A long time passed, and then a tremor ran through her body. She blinked. Her eyes were filled with confusion at first, but they quickly grew clearer. Her expression was one of melancholy. Eventually, she looked up and saw that there were two others with her here high atop Violet East Mountain. One was Fang Mu, the other was Yifeimu. Both of them had their eyes closed. One had a face filled with thoughtfulness, the other confusion. The former was Meng Hao, the latter was Yifeimu. As for her, she was still about 10 paces from the very peak of the mountain. Further behind her were the other two nameless candidates in the trial by fire. It was at this moment that Yifeimu suddenly trembled and began to awaken. This chapter was sponsored by Deathblade.